Chapter 45-59. The Inheritance. Xiao Hua suddenly realized something. Reverend Yun raised his hand and pointed into the distance, saying, "Fellow Daoist, look. The silhouette over there is emitting a golden light." Xiao Hua hurriedly looked over. Indeed, within the pitch-black silhouette, strange silhouettes were lit up one after another, like lamps in the night. "The sons of gods are sitting there." The celestial muttered, "Could that be where Xian Hong is discussing the law? Let's go and have a look." Thinking of the inheritance, Xiao Hua's heart stirred. He flew up and waved his hand. After flying over the platform, in the time it took to finish a meal, some large silhouettes appeared in front of them. They were similar to the pavilions from before, but most of the silhouettes were shining with a golden light. Only a few of them were dim. All the silhouettes that were shining with a golden light emitted a powerful and unpredictable aura. Xiao Hua and the others could not get close at all. Xiao Hua could only choose a dim silhouette to land on. However, the silhouette was like a pavilion without any door. Xiao Hua reached out and touched the silhouette, but he felt a hard sensation. He could not enter at all. In the middle of the pavilion silhouette, there was a small protrusion. When Xiao Hua touched the silhouette, the protrusion flashed with a golden light, and a strange lock was revealed. When Xiao Hua's hand left the silhouette, the lock disappeared again. Lock. Key. When Xiao Hua saw the lock, he immediately thought of the key he had obtained in the starry sky. He hurriedly took out the key and raised his hand to insert it into the lock. However, the lock flashed with a golden light and the key bounced off. "This key is actually not the key." Xiao Hua was a little disappointed. Then, he took out the key he had obtained in the Yecheong Heavenly Palace. Unfortunately, the key still could not be inserted into the lock. "That's not right." Xiao Hua was depressed. He thought to himself, "I obtained 2 keys in the Xingyue Palace. How can it not be the key? Could it be that these 2 keys belong to other pavilions?" Thinking of this, Xiao Hua did not dare to be negligent. He looked up and saw that there was another silhouette not far away from the pavilion silhouette. He hurriedly flew over. This silhouette was even weirder. It looked like 2 inverted triangles joined together. Xiao Hua touched the outline again, and the place where the 2 triangles touched flashed with a faint golden light. Another strange lock was revealed. Xiao Hua hurriedly passed the 2 keys over. The light golden lock flashed with a golden light, and the 2 keys bounced open. Just as Xiao Hua was about to head to another pavilion, fellow Daoist Kwong reminded him, "Fellow Daoist, don't forget that you still have a key that fell into the spatial crevice from the dragon field." Xiao Hua casually replied, "That's the key to the dragon domain, it can't be used here, right?" However, after he finished speaking, Xiao Hua also smiled. Since the holy lotus seed could be obtained from the spatial crack, then perhaps the key obtained from the spatial crack could also be used here. Unfortunately, the key with the dragon pattern still bounced off the golden light and did not open the lock. Hee. Xiao Hua waved his hand again and took out the key he obtained from the Heaven and Earth Pagoda. He waved his hand and sent it into the lock. He smiled and said, "I have many keys, why don't I try them one by one?" Without waiting for Xiao Hua to finish speaking, with a swish, a light sound rang out. The lock shone brightly, and the key engraved with dragon patterns actually fell into the lock. Along with the light, the 2 triangular outlines lit up. At the same time that the lock entered the outline, layer upon layer of dragon patterns appeared in front of Xiao Hua's eyes. Xiao Hua reached out his hand and pushed. The originally solid outline had already disappeared, and his hand sank into it. This is really strange." Xiao Hua was overjoyed, but also extremely puzzled. This key came from the Heaven and Earth Pagoda. It should belong to the supreme dragon god of the great desolate continent. How can his key open this pavilion of the Star Moon Palace? Could it be that supreme dragon god is the ancient almighty who refined this Star Moon Palace? However, Xiao Hua could not think too much at this moment. Under the urging of celestial being, Xiao Hua stepped forward and flew into the 2 triangular pavilions. Inside the pavilions was the ocean. The blue seawater looked like crystal, and layers of strong aura of the great desolate continent flowed like the wind in this seemingly endless ocean. As soon as Xiao Hua, celestial being, Daoist witch, and the others entered the pavilions, the sound of thunder rang out again. As the sound of thunder fell, the entire ocean shook. Streams of indescribable principles emerged from the shaking and rushed into Xiao Hua's body, stimulating the crystal-like divine spark and primal purple energy. The invisible golden light of the divine spark shot out from Xiao Hua's body, connecting celestial being, Daoist witch, Reverend Yun, and Lord Archfiend. The principles vibrated the golden light and turned into profound meanings that fell into everyone's bodies. Just like Xiao Hua, they could clearly hear the voice in their hearts. This time, Xiao Hong will discuss the Tao of gods. Gods are almighty beings. Anything can become a god, no matter if it is a demon, a devil, a spirit, a human, a dragon, a sorcerer, or this. Xiao Hua heard it clearly. Although he was greatly shocked, he also felt a little depressed. Damn it, I'm just a cultivator from the mortal realm. I haven't ascended to become an immortal yet. Why should I listen to the Tao of gods? If Senior Shu hasn't returned to the immortal realm, I'll bring him here to listen to it. However, right at this moment, the voice continued, ordinary gods can only be regarded as demigods or even nihility gods. Even if they ascend to the divine realm of the great desolate continent and continue their cultivation, they can never become original gods, let alone incipient god. This is what people in the three realms often say, gods are not achieved through cultivation. This is because, in order to become an original god, one must obtain the words of a god, the chi of a god, the spirit of a god, and the body of a god before ascending to the divine realm of the great desolate continent. In the three realms, the cultivation of all living things is inclined towards one kind. It could be the words of a god, the chi of a god, the spirit of a god, or the body of a god. Even if there is a cultivator who can obtain two, if he obtains all four, there is not even one in a billion. Boom! When these words fell into Xiao Hua's heart, it was like a sudden clap of thunder, like a sudden enlightenment. In an instant, Xiao Hua's mind became clear. Without even thinking, he immediately sat down cross-legged and turned his 5 hearts towards the sky to listen quietly. The Tao of gods, even if he didn't understand it, he still had to listen. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The ancient great sorcerers cultivated the green seal script and obtained the words of a god. The ancient great scholars cultivated the inscription script and obtained the chi of a god. The ancient Buddha cultivated the golden seal script and obtained the spirit of a god. If a cultivator has these three, he can ascend to the divine realm of the great desolate continent. As for the body of a god, it is the primal chaos body after all. It is rare even in the divine realm of the great desolate continent. If a son of God wants to become an incipient god, he has to refine his body with the chaotic energy before he ascends to the divine realm of the great desolate continent. Even a demigod in the divine realm of the great desolate continent can hardly survive after falling into the chaos, let alone a cultivator from the lower realm. Therefore, in the divine realm of the great desolate continent, it is easy to cultivate the original god realm, but difficult to cultivate the incipient god realm. At first, Xiao Hua's heart was still pounding, and he was even wild with joy. But later on, he became intoxicated. These words were not only the truth of the heaven and earth, but also something that Xiao Hua would never be able to hear. Moreover, when these words fell into Xiao Hua's heart, the heavenly Tao Xiao Hua and the karma Xiao Hua in the space were intoxicated. Countless profound meanings slowly flowed into Xiao Hua's heart. As the words fell into his heart, the truth that was not easy to comprehend also turned into murmuring water. It was the same for Xiao Hua, the celestial, Daoist sorcerer, Reverend Yun, and Shu the Exalted. Indescribable ripples were emanating from the bodies of the 4 clones, and dazzling lights were flashing from time to time. When they were intoxicated, the bodies of the 4 clones trembled at the same time. The celestial took out the small 9-colored mountain and slapped it on the top of his head. Immediately, the 9-colored light began to overflow from his head, slowly spreading down his body along with the words. Daoist sorcerer also took out the strange-colored bone flower, opened his mouth, and swallowed it. After that, his body began to tremble as well. Gradually, the trembling turned into a rhythm as he refined the bone flower. Reverend Yun and Shi the Exalted had also taken out the crystal dragon and the translucent blood-red skull respectively. Taking advantage of the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, they began to refine and devour them. After an unknown amount of time, although the discussion was neither fast nor slow, Xiao Hua could already tell that it was not a single existence that was discussing the law, but rather multiple existences. Some of the contents of the discussion were like sweet rain to Xiao Hua, indescribably wonderful, while some were incomprehensible. However, Xiao Hua was not dispirited. He only memorized what he heard, regardless of whether he would forget it in the future. Moreover, he also clearly knew that the heavenly Tao Xiao Hua and Karma Xiao Hua had long since escaped from his space, turning into an ethereal place to carefully comprehend. The mysteries of these two doppelgangers were something that even Xiao Hua himself did not know, so he also believed that the things he did not understand, these two doppelgangers would certainly understand. When another voice rang out, Xiao Hua's spirit was shaken, and he once again focused his mind, for the words were exactly the secret that he could not find even after all the hardships he had gone through. The world began with the soul, followed by the 5 elements, and then came the strength. Therefore, the mystery of the soul is comparable to the heaven and earth. The strength of the soul is far stronger than the strength of the 5 elements, and is even stronger than the strength of the fleshly body. Every creature has a spirit, and their fleshly body is different. Be it a beast, a man, a wood, or a spirit, they all have different bodies, different cultivation methods, and different paths to becoming a god. But the soul of every creature is one. The essence is the same, but the form is different. Or, you can say that the grades are different. The cultivation of the soul is the engraving of the Dharma, which is the power of the heaven and earth. Only the cultivation of the soul can make all creatures equal. And only those who can control the strength of the soul can be called original God, and only then can they be qualified to step into the incipient God realm. Therefore, the cultivation of the soul touches the mystery of the heaven and earth, and harms the foundation of all creatures. Although one is an almighty expert, it is also a great taboo. I have traveled all over the immemorial world, read countless ancient secret histories, and found the mystery of the soul cultivation fragments. I have shared it with the sons of God, so they can comprehend it and see the heaven and earth. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to the starting point to cast your monthly vote, recommendation vote, bookmark, and tip. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 4560. Daoist Witch, who was sitting next to Xiao Hua, trembled violently. His body glowed with an indescribable green light, which took the shape of a flower and began to bloom slowly. As the strange voice fell, Heaven and Earth Xiao Hua and Karma Xiao Hua also sent some light threads into the flower, cooperating with Daoist Witch. At the same time, the green light around Daoist Witch rushed into Xiao Hua again, as if some stamens were stuck on his body. The souls that Xiao Hua obtained from the Heaven and Earth Pagoda began to slowly fall into the flower along with the green light. The faint green light gradually grew thicker. By the time the voice finished speaking, Daoist which had completely transformed into the shape of a flower. The souls in the space slowly fell into his body in an orderly manner. The heavenly Tao Xiao Hua and Karma Xiao Hua were also withdrawn from Daoist Witch's body. Immediately after that, other voices began to talk about the techniques one by one. Some of them were the techniques of Confucian cultivators, some were the techniques of spirit cultivators, some were the techniques of demon cultivators, some were the techniques of celestial being, and some were the techniques of fiend cultivators. In short, all kinds of mystic techniques that could lead one to become a god were revealed one after another. The celestial being, Reverend Yun, and Archfiend Shi were wild with joy. Of course, Xiao Hua felt sorry for Reverend Thunderbolt, Feng Wu, and Wen Chu. But he also believed that with Heavenly Tao and Karma Xiao Hua here, these meat pies that fell from the sky would definitely fall into their mouth. Although they had already been chewed by 2 of his clones. Putting aside the fact that Xiao Hua had obtained the biggest meat pie from Star Moon Palace and encountered one of the most important fortuitous encounters in his path of cultivation, there was a small fishing village in the southwest of Hidden Immortal Continent, near the East Sea. As it was already dusk, smoke rose from kitchen chimneys, and the aroma of fish wafted out from everywhere. Although the sea breeze was still blowing, it was very gentle now, blowing the aroma to the beach. The side of the beach was covered with reefs. Many children were either playing or busying themselves near these reefs. Wherever the tide passed, not only would there be a lot of prawns, crabs, and seaweed left on the beach, there were also marine creatures that were rarely seen between the reefs. The fisherwomen in the fishing village collected the shrimp, crabs, and seaweed from the beach and brought them back to cook, leaving these children to harvest between the reefs. I caught a big starfish. A thin child took out a bowl-sized starfish from a crevice and jumped onto the reef to show off proudly. On a nearby reef, another slightly chubby child said disdainfully, "What's there to show off about a starfish? Look at me." As he spoke, the slightly plump child took out a basin-sized crab from the bamboo basket beside him and said, "This crab is enough for me and my parents to eat." The thin child from before was a little tongue-tied, as if his self-esteem had been struck. He opened his mouth, but didn't know how to refute. However, when he rolled his eyes, he hurriedly pointed at another child who had buried his head in the rock wall and remained silent. No matter how big your coral is, it's not as good as the one salted fish boy picked up. I heard, that coral can be sold for a lot of copper coins. TSK. The chubby child immediately retorted, "I'm competing with you in terms of food, not in terms of value. The coral that salted fish boy picked up looks good, but who knows how much it can be sold for in a distant town? A big-headed fish picked up from the grass. She can't even carry it herself." The thin child was anxious. He pointed at a short girl further away and shouted, "Hers is also better than yours." However, the thin child had only said half a sentence when he suddenly stopped talking. He looked at where the girl was and froze there in a daze. The slightly plump child naturally didn't hesitate. He looked up at the short girl and shouted, "Who said that?" However, the slightly plump child was just like the thin child. Before he finished speaking, he was already stunned there. Because where the thin child was pointing, there was not only the thin girl, but also in the west, where the sun was setting. Under the orange clouds, an extremely huge ship slowly floated over from where the tide fell. The ship was so majestic that it was the first time the slightly plump child had seen it in his life. He couldn't help but open his mouth and stand there in a daze, not knowing what to say. The ship floated extremely fast, far faster than the usual ships the children had seen. In just a few minutes, it was already close to the coast. At this moment, the thin child came to his senses and shouted, "I saw this ship first. It's bigger than the biggest ship you've seen." Until now, the thin child still hadn't forgotten to compete with the slightly plump child. "Pig, I've never seen such a big pig. This. How many years will it take for my family to eat this?" The slightly chubby child was obviously a little bigger than the thin child. He threw this kind of boring comparison to the back of his mind and opened his eyes to look at the big pig lying on the bow of the ship. His eyes flashed with a fervent light as he muttered under his breath. When the thin child heard that, he became anxious again and shouted, "I saw this huge pig first too. You can't fight with me. After my father slaughters this pig, he'll give you a tail." Ah! The voices of the two children were quite loud and clear. The surrounding children who were busy picking up the sea creatures all heard them and raised their heads. Their little faces were filled with astonishment under the orange sunset. "Damn it!" At this moment, a thunderous voice sounded above the children's heads. "Who dares to eat my meat? You'll be lucky if I don't eat you." Following this voice, boom! The seawater outside the reef suddenly formed a huge wave. A wave in the shape of a pig rushed towards the thin child with a roar. "Wah!" That frail child cried loudly. The lower half of his clothes had already been soaked by the seawater, and now, a pungent smell of urine wafted over. Monster! The thin girl in the distance was still the quick-witted one. Seeing this, she hurriedly jumped down from the reef and shouted as she jumped, "The monster is coming! The monster is here! The monster is here!" The children came to their senses. Their faces turned pale with fright as they moved their little legs. They either jumped off the reefs or jumped out of the sea, all of them running towards the fishing village. However, even though they were scared, their little hands were still tightly gripping the bamboo baskets and other things that they carried with them. "Mother, mother!" "Wah wah!" The thin child who was so scared that he wet himself cried loudly and wanted to jump down from the reef. However, His legs had already turned to jelly and he couldn't move a single step no matter how hard he tried. Besides crying loudly, there was only despair in his eyes. Dan. When the chubby child heard the thin child's cries, he subconsciously slowed down his steps. However, when he saw the huge tide behind the reef, the fear in his eyes grew stronger. He no longer dared to hesitate. He turned around and ran towards the fishing village while shouting, "The monsters are here. Dan has been eaten by the monsters." The girl named Marrow Cow was the first to land on the beach and run away. When she saw Erden lying on the reef, she turned back without any hesitation and ran towards the reef. After running for a few steps, she threw down the bamboo basket in her hand. Where the bamboo basket fell, several big crabs fell out. They waved their pincers and fled into the seawater horizontally. How could Marrow Cow be faster than the wave? Before she could get close to the reef, the pig-shaped wave had already reached the reef. Marrow Cow shouted, "Erden, jump down or I. Erden cried and said the word I a few times. In the end, he couldn't say a complete sentence. Boom! The pig-shaped wave fell from the sky and smashed onto Erden's head. Seeing that Erden was about to be swept away, Marrow Cow's eyes were also filled with despair. This was because the wave was so big that it seemed to cover the entire sky. If the wave fell, she would also be swept away, not to mention that there was a pig-shaped monster hiding in the wave. Just as Erden and Marrow Cow were in despair, the huge pig-shaped wave condensed in the air. The pig's tail swept towards Erden's head and knocked him down onto the reef. Then, from the tail's root, a gush of seawater fell and drenched Erden's entire body. Whoa! Erden, who was so scared that he didn't know how to cry, couldn't help but cry again. Ha ha ha, eat me, eat me. The huge pig-shaped wave laughed loudly and actually twisted its fat waist on Erden's head. Who? Marrow Cow suddenly woke up and let out a long sigh. Then, her legs went soft and she collapsed on the beach. She ran away and ran back. She was already exhausted. Liao Cow struggled to get up from the ground, but no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to do so. Dan was soaked by the seawater, and while he was crying, he choked on the water. While he was coughing, the pig-shaped wave rolled up in the air, and the pitiful Liao Cow and Dan fell into the wave. The wave was like a giant hand, sweeping the two of them towards the distant ship. Marrow Cow was scared again. Her two black eyes turned rapidly and Erden was about to grin again. Amitabha, chastity. At this time, a gentle voice sounded again. You're being naughty again. Why don't you act like a monk? Look at how scared these children are. Master. Chastity's voice sounded as if he was wronged. Disciple wasn't being naughty. Disciple was just testing people's hearts. Didn't you see? Disciple only used a small spell and saw the selfishness of human nature. So many children, except for this little girl called Marrow Cow, none of them stayed to save this child called Erden. They are so young and yet they don't have a caring heart. What will they do in the future? P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chijian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 4561. Amitabha Buddha. The gentle voice continues, they are still children. It is already good enough that they can protect themselves in the face of danger. How can I ask them to save others? Moreover, their temperament needs to be cultivated bit by bit. It is impossible to know it from young. This is also the purpose of Master's Sutra Seeking Bliss. I want to use Buddhism to teach them from young. Besides, didn't this girl stay? As long as one person stays, the humanity of this world will not be annihilated. Marrow Cow was originally afraid, but after hearing the voice, her heart calmed down. Although she did not understand the meaning of the words, she knew the Amitabha Buddha. Just as she was feeling relieved, her eyes lit up again. The sea waves disappeared and she was actually standing on a huge ship. Before she could see everything on the ship clearly, a strange face of a fire ape flashed in front of her. Ah! Marrow Cow could not help but be afraid. She took 2 steps back and almost fell. At this moment, she felt something warm on her back. Marrow Cow turned around to look. Ah! She screamed again. A pig ear that looked bigger than her was slightly swaying behind her back, Amitabha Buddha. The gentle voice sounded beside Maro Cow, little benefactor, we are monks from sutra seeking bliss. They are all this poor monk's disciples. Don't be afraid. Maro Cow looked towards the direction of the voice. A monk wearing a kasaya, wearing a pailu crown and holding a 9-ring monk staff was standing on the deck of the ship with a smile on his face. Wasn't this monk Chuanzang? Chuanzang did not neglect Maro Cow just because she was a little girl. He still held up one of his palms and saluted. Maro Cow's heart calmed down, but she was also a little panicked. She opened her mouth and stuttered, "Greetings, great master, W.A. Dan, who is beside Maro Cow, cries again, Mother, Amitabha." Chuanzang smiled and said, "Young benefactor, don't worry. Your clothes are already wet. Let my disciple dry your clothes first. The sea breeze here is very strong. Maybe you will get sick, master." On the other side of the deck, a white dragon horse walked over, scaring Maro Cow, because the white dragon horse spoke human language. Moreover, it was the language of hidden immortal continent. You don't know this. These children grew up by the sea since they were young. They are not afraid of the sea breeze. Don't look at how cold the weather is now. Letting them swim 2 laps in the sea will not be a problem. Chimpage. Jinjie's lazy voice sounded again. Do you think they're dragons like you? He even swam 2 laps in the sea. Let's not talk about freezing to death. We'll tire them to death. The white dragon horse was naturally Jinfeng. He smiled and replied, "Eldest senior brother, the circle I'm talking about is a casual circle. It's not like the big circle in the Eastern Sea." "Bah!" Jinjie replied mercilessly, "You still have the nerve to talk about your East Sea. You, the 10th prince of the East Sea Dragon Palace, have no face at all. What happened to the dragon boat? What happened to the banquet? What happened to the song and dance of the conch maiden? Damn it, not a single promise was fulfilled. On the contrary, the wild flood dragons and sea beasts are endless. If it wasn't for me, Master would have been eaten by the sea beasts the moment he stepped into the Eastern Sea, right? You still have the nerve to call yourself the 10th prince of the Dragon Palace in front of me? Eldest senior brother." Jinfeng also felt wronged. Although his horse face was burning, he still said in a low voice, "Little brother also doesn't know what happened. There must be some big change in the East Sea Dragon Palace. Otherwise, when Master passes through the Eastern Sea, they would have to express their gratitude." Chimph, what's there to express? Those suppressed sea beasts coming over to make up the numbers? Then wouldn't they have to make me help out? Jinjie snorted coldly and said, "Don't say so many useless things. Since your East Sea Dragon Palace doesn't have any offerings, when we get ashore, you still have to carry me. The previous agreement doesn't count anymore." "All right. Eldest senior brother." Jinfeng was dejected. He swung his tail and walked to the side of the ship listlessly. Chunjie opened his mouth as if he wanted to reprimand him. However, when he saw Jinjie's mountain-like body, he shook his head slightly and said to Jinkong, "Help this child dry his clothes." "Yes, master." Jinkong replied. Just as he took a few steps, Erden was so scared that he wanted to grin again. Jinjie called out, "Jinhan, what are you waiting for? Do you want master to call you? Don't you know that your Confucian cultivation true chi is the best at drying clothes?" Yes, eldest senior brother. Little brother understands." On the other side of the deck, a Confucian general dressed in armor instantly got out of his lazy state and flew over energetically. As he rubbed his hands, faint flames appeared. They finally saw a human again. Although this human had thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a murderous aura, Shuakao and Erden finally calmed down. With Jinjie around, Jinhan naturally wouldn't burn Erden's clothes. He just pretended to be careless. Therefore, it didn't take long for him to dry Erden's clothes. At this moment, the ship also shook and stopped. From the cabin of the ship, 2 7th-grade Essence Force Sea Demons popped their heads out. When the 2 sea demons appeared, Shuakao and Erden trembled again. They were so scared that they even closed their eyes. The 2 sea demons tiptoed to a place not far from Chunzong. They lowered their voices and said respectfully, "Master, we have already arrived at the hidden immortal continent." Our ship is too big and can't get close to the shore. The sea demons spoke in the human language. They were very stuttering and even a little unclear. Chunzong was a little stunned as if he didn't understand. Zhenjie snorted and said, "If you know that you can't get close to the shore, then what are you still talking about? Why don't you hurry up and get a small boat over? Don't you know that my master can't fly?" Yes. When the two sea demons heard Zhenjie's words, their bodies clearly trembled. Without saying anything else, they hugged their heads and ran back. Then, they heard a crackling sound from the cabin. Not long later, a rather big ship appeared on the surface of the sea. Damn it! Zhenjie cursed. Can such a big ship get close to the shore? Yes. A sea demon hurriedly said, "Senior, don't worry. There are no submerged reefs at the bottom of the sea. This ship can definitely get close to the shore." Good. Zhenjie nodded and said, "If my master's kasaya is stained with a drop of seawater, I will teach you a lesson." That sea demon replied with a sad face, "Senior, how about this junior carry master to the shore?" Nonsense. If he can carry you and fly, why do we need you? Zhenfeng jumped up and said, "I am the 10th prince of the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace. I have already carried my master across the Eastern Sea. Do you know? Amitabha." Chunzong chanted, "Thank you, benefactors. This poor monk will take his leave now. I hope we will meet again in the future." You're welcome. The two sea demons hurriedly returned the salute with a relieved expression. Zhenjie finally stood up from the deck, causing the entire ship to shake. However, this was nothing. His words stunned the two sea demons on the spot. "Go back and recite the rebirth mantra for me 3,000,000 times. 3,000,000 times. The sea demons' faces were even more bitter than if they had eaten a pill. Zhenjie glanced at the two sea demons and said coldly, "What's wrong? Don't you miss the rebirth mantra? How many living beings have you killed? Can you transcend all of them by reciting it 3,000,000 times? If you don't miss it, I will recite the rebirth mantra twice now." Yes, senior. We will definitely recite it, definitely." The two sea demons turned pale with fright and immediately replied, "Recite it now." Zhenjie stood up from the ship and watched as Zhenkong carefully helped Chuanzang onto the small boat, berating him sternly. "Namo Amitabha yi tota gado yi todi yi Amitabha po di yi Amitabha po di Amitabha po di yi 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 Amitabha ah." Why is the rebirth mantra so short? A moment later, Zhenjie stopped in the air and glared at the two sea demons. "You dare to fool me, senior." The two sea demons' faces changed drastically, and they hurriedly said, "We don't dare." Eldest senior brother. Zhenhan, who was dancing the sutra with her staff, hurriedly whispered, "The mantra of rebirth is so short." Zhenjie was stunned and looked a little embarrassed. Then, he snorted and said, "Forget it, you're lucky. If I had known earlier, I would have let you all chant." At this point, Zhenjie tactfully shut up and walked towards the hidden immortal continent with large strides. Although Zhenjie was sincerely worshipping Buddha and was also very respectful towards Chuanzang, he was also extremely lazy. Not to mention chanting the Buddhist sutra, he couldn't even remember the name of the Buddhist sutra. The two sea demons didn't dare to say anything. Seeing Zhenjie leave, the two sea demons hurriedly flew back to the ship and carefully stood on the deck. After Chuanzang sat on the small boat and reached the beach, the two sea demons jumped into the sea and escaped towards the depths of the East Sea. Chuanzang got down from the small boat and Zhenkong carefully supported him. Chuanzang walked past the beach and turned his head to look at the vast sea and the footprints he left on the beach. He couldn't help but sigh, "Amitabha, this poor monk has finally stepped onto the land of the hidden immortal continent again. My Buddha is merciful. This time, it is completely different. Last time, this poor monk only had the heart of Buddha. The heart is willing but the strength is insufficient. Now, this poor monk has 3 scrolls of Mahayana Buddhist Sutra. The Buddha's mantra is not only to enlighten the common people, it is also to let the hidden immortal continent bathe in the glory of Buddha. Although this journey was difficult, this poor monk has finally walked more than half of it. The so-called merit and virtue is nothing. The only real thing is these footprints. These footprints can once again step into the longevity town. I hope they can also step into the hearts of the people. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chijian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 4562. When Chunzong turned around, he saw a row of shallow footprints beside the footprints he left on the beach. It was Zhen Kong. Of Chunzong's 4 disciples, Zhen Jie, Zhen Feng, and Zhen Han were all riding the wind. Only Zhen Kong was supporting Chunzong as they walked along the beach. Dang dang dang. At this moment, the sound of a gong came from the fishing village in the distance. Clamorous shouts could be heard, "Help, the sea monsters are eating people." Amidst the noise, a group of strong fishermen rushed out of the fishing village with harpoons, spears, scimitars, and other weapons in their hands. They rushed toward the beach while shouting, "Amitabha!" Chunzong retracted his gaze from the sea and looked at Zhen Jie, who was standing in the air. "Zhen Jie, this is all your fault. Why aren't you apologizing to the fishermen?" "Yes, master." Zhen Jie nodded. He raised his hand and punched Zhen Feng, who was carrying Ji Cao and Dan on his butt. He scolded, "Go, apologize to the fishermen. Why is it me again? What does this have to do with me?" Zhen Feng felt wronged and shouted. Just as he was about to give up, a gust of wind suddenly blew from the East Sea. The sky that was covered in the sunset glow now had layers of black and white ribbons. These colors seemed to be caused by the gust of wind, but also seemed to be caused by the folding of the void. At the same time, where the sea met the sky, a layer of pitch-black demonic clouds quickly spread along the surface of the sea. Within the demonic clouds, the silhouette of a huge shell could be seen. In front of the demonic clouds, there was a faint golden shadow. This shadow was like a huge eagle. With a flap of its wings, it flew hundreds of miles. This shadow carried a terrifying aura as it crossed the surface of the sea. Wherever the shadow passed, it created waves that were dozens of feet tall. It looked like it was faster than lightning as it pounced toward Chunzong. "Protect, master." Zhen Kong was originally supporting Chunzong. At this moment, he roared and reached out his hand to grab the magic wand. Then, he rushed into the sky. He faced the terrifying aura head-on. "Okay." Zhen Han didn't dare to delay. She replied and threw the scripture on the ground. She waved her staff and flew to Chunzong's side. She looked like a loyal and righteous person. Damn it. Zhen Feng cursed when he saw Zheng Han snatching the opportunity to perform before him. He hurriedly landed on the ground and tossed 2 balls and 2 grass to the ground. He didn't care whether the 2 children were injured or not as he hurriedly shouted, "Master, don't be afraid. Your disciple is here." But Longma Zhen Feng rushed over like the wind, also blocking Chun Ju behind him. Fortunately, Liao Cao and Dan were originally children who grew up on the beach. Although Long Ma Zhen Feng threw it savagely, there weren't any sharp rocks on the beach. The 2 children rolled on the beach and immediately got up. Looking at the violent winds and huge waves in the distance, as well as the dark clouds in the sky, they didn't hesitate to rush towards the small fishing village. Outside the small fishing village, the fishermen who had already come out with all kinds of weapons saw the white waves on the sea and the dark clouds in the sky. Although the terrifying aura wasn't directed at them, it was enough to make them tremble with fear. Now that they saw Ji Cao and Dan rushing back, who would dare to be arrogant outside? After receiving Ji Cao and Dan, they all turned around and ran back to the fishing village. They tightly closed their doors and didn't even have the courage to peek outside. Zhen Jie saw the faces of Zhen Feng and the others. Zhen Jie revealed a cold smile. However, when the terrifying aura approached, Zhen Jie's expression turned cold. He shouted inwardly, "Not good." Zhen Jie hurriedly took out the 9-tooth rake and his body glowed brightly. His body expanded and he shouted, "Damn fire ape, this is a demonic beast with an 8th grade essence force. How can you be a match for him? Quickly come back." Zhen Jie's attitude towards Zhen Kong was different. He knew very well that Zhen Kong had disregarded his opponent's strength and charged forward without any regard for his own safety. This was Zhen Kong's true intention and not some pretense. Thus, His words were filled with great concern. Unfortunately, Jinjie's reminder was too late. Before he finished speaking, a golden-winged rock appeared. Wasn't it Peng Jun? A golden light flashed in Peng Jun's eyes. He glanced at Jun Kong and stretched out a sharp claw. Ka! It swept through the sky and tore the void apart. The sharp claw instantly grabbed Jun Kong's head. Under the sharp claws, the space within several kilometers was sealed. Let alone Jun Kong, who was flying, even the surface of the sea beneath him froze in an instant. Roar! Jun Kong faced Peng Jun, who was many times stronger than him. His eyes turned red as he roared towards the sky. The blood vessels on his arms flared as he tried to wave his magic wand. Unfortunately, under Peng Jun's sharp claw, Jun Kong was like a child. Peng! The sharp claw grabbed Jun Kong's magic wand. At the same time, the magic wand was sent flying. Jun Kong's body also fell into the sea like a rock. Damn it! Jun Feng saw this from afar and his body trembled. Even his horse's legs went soft. He shouted in shock, how can there be a demonic beast with 8th grade origin energy? Is Mahavairokanna crazy? I have to hurry and inform the Immortal Palace. Jun Han's heart was also pounding. He moved to block Chunzong's body and said, oh, no, I have to hurry to the Immortal Palace to get reinforcements. Chunzong, on the other hand, didn't panic at all. He chanted Buddha's name and calmly looked at the sea and sky. Roar! Seeing Jun Kong being knocked into the sea, Jinjie was furious. With a roar, it rushed into the sky and turned into a huge light shadow. This light shadow suddenly elongated and distorted. In an instant, it landed in front of Peng Jun. Without waiting for the light shadow to solidify, woo! The wind whistled again. The nine-toothed rake was surrounded by clouds and it pounced towards Peng Jun like a nine-headed dragon. Rumble. Just as the nine-toothed rake descended, the black and white stripes in the sky suddenly condensed. Amidst the rumbling of thunder, Demon King Ni Quan's figure appeared. When Ni Quan saw such a wild chastity ring, a strange expression appeared in his eyes. As he waved his tail, layers of spatial ripples appeared in an attempt to block the nine-toothed rake. Bang, 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 bang. A series of explosions sounded. Wherever the nine-toothed rake passed, it was invincible. All the spatial ripples were destroyed. Just when Ni Quan was about to wave his tail again, Jinjie raised its hoof. Wang! It was as if the world was being trampled by this hoof. The light shadows in the surrounding 10 li fell into this hoof. Jinjie's hoof suddenly disappeared into the void. Soon after, Peng Jun's eagle cry resounded amidst the rumbling sounds. Finally, with a loud boom, Peng Jun's body flipped a few times in the air. He hurriedly flapped his wings and stabilized his body. How can this pig be so powerful? Peng Jun couldn't help but exclaim in his heart, no wonder Daoist Xiao told us to be careful. Ouch, not good. Peng Jun was surprised. Waves appeared in the void again. The nine-toothed rake shot out from the void like a meteor and ruthlessly smashed towards Peng Jun's back. Peng Jun didn't doubt that if this nine-toothed rake fell, 9 bloody holes would appear on his body. He would also lose half his life. Fortunately, Peng Jun didn't need to raise his head and spit out lightning. At this moment, Bai Qing had already arrived. The pitch-black demonic cloud scattered across the sky. The huge shell blocked the nine-tooth rake. With a loud bang, the multicolored light shone for thousands of feet. Bai Qing's shell trembled rapidly. The huge body also staggered as if it couldn't stand steadily. The multicolored halo on Bai Qing's shell was extremely powerful. Even if Chastity Ring's nine-toothed rake hit it, the halo alone could greatly reduce the force. However, at this time, the multicolored halo had been taken back by God's punishment. Bai Qing could not adapt to it for a while. She used her shell to take on Chastity Ring's attack. Previously, when Jinjie was fighting with a great demon of the lower 8th grade in the Great Snow Mountain, he had just arrived at the Elysium from the primitive continent. Due to the laws of heaven and earth, many of his supernatural powers were restricted by the laws. He could only reach the upper 8th grade of the Elysium. Moreover, at that time, Jinjie wasn't familiar with the environment of the 3 continents and couldn't fully display his strength. In addition, the 5-colored halo of the great demon was magical. It seemed that he could only fight the great demon to a draw. But now, not only was Zhenjie used to the power of the stars and moon in the 3 continents, he also used some secret techniques to avoid the power of the laws and recovered some of his supernatural powers. His strength had already surpassed the peak of the 8th grade of the Elysium and was not far from the edge of the 9th grade of the Elysium again. How could Bai Qing, who had lost her 5-colored halo, resist the 9-toothed rake so easily? Under this attack, although the shell wasn't penetrated, Bai Qing was also injured. As the huge shell swayed, a shadow immediately appeared and hurriedly escaped from the battle. "Where do you think you're going?" Zhenjie took advantage of the situation and roared. Once again, he stretched out his trotter and stomped towards Bai Qing. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, Ni Quan made his move. Ripples appeared on his horn and a series of spatial collapses closed in on Zhenjie. Roar! Zhenjie was slightly shocked. He opened his mouth and spat out a pillar of light. It was like a fountain that hit the spatial collapses and instantly pierced through them. Damn it! Seeing Bai Qing take advantage of the situation to escape, Ni Quan flapped his wings and pounced over. On the other side, Peng Jun also flapped his wings and attacked with his sharp claws. Zhenjie cursed under his breath, where did these 3 great demons come from? Their strength is at the 8th grade of the Elysium. I have enough confidence to fight against 2 of them, but it will be difficult to deal with 3 of them. You demons! Zhenjie waved his 9-toothed rake in the air and shouted, "Where are you demons from?" "I'm a monk from the Sutra of Nirvana. What grudges do I have with you? Why are you chasing after me? I'm in a good mood today. If it's a misunderstanding, get the hell out of here and I'll let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, don't blame me for killing all of you with my rake. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chijian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 4563. Humph. Bai Qing broke away from the battle. His 2 shells glowed faintly, and Bai Qing's clear face appeared on the surface of the shell. His face was filled with resentment. How dare you call yourself a monk from the sutra seeking nirvana? How can there be a monk who calls himself an old man in this world? That's my freedom. It has nothing to do with you. Zhenjie shouted impatiently, if you have a grudge, say it quickly. If you're mistaken, get out of here and let me have a good night's sleep. Ha ha. Peng Jun sneered, monk, if we don't have a grudge, why did we come all the way here from the sacred realm of 1,000 demons? If we don't kill you today to avenge my poor brother Bai, we won't have the face to call ourselves demon kings. Brother Bai? Although Peng Jun didn't mention the name of the 5-colored shell demon, nor did he say that he wanted to avenge it, Zhenjie understood that not many demons had died in his hands. The 5-colored shell demon was one of them, and the strongest one at that. Seeing that the 3 demon kings wanted to avenge it, the grudge was naturally formed with the 5-colored shell demon. However, Zhenjie still pretended not to know. He sneered, 3 old demons, on this sutra seeking nirvana, there are thousands of demons that died in my hands. Who knows which one you're talking about? Besides, those demons were tricked into coming here to seek death. If you want revenge, you can find the one who tricked them. Why are you looking for me? Humph, I only know that my brother died in your hands. Bai Qing snorted, I don't know anything else. Your royal younger brother? Zhenjie looked at Bai Qing strangely and asked, you look so poor that you don't even have a piece of colored clothing. How can you be the brother of that upstart shining with 5 colors? Obviously, you were tricked into coming here. Bai Qing's heart ached at the mention of 5 colors. He sneered, you don't have to worry about that. Just give me your life. Just as he said this, Peng Jun screamed from afar, damn it. On Peng Jun's back, a huge pig's hoof had appeared out of nowhere. This pig's hoof had crushed the space within a radius of dozens of miles, trapping Peng Jun within it. You! Seeing that she had been fooled, Bai Qing was furious. The colorless halo around her flashed again, and she smashed toward the chastity ring. Bai Qing's 5-colored sea god shell's bloodline had been taken away, but the shell had been refined for many years. The material of the shell itself was also rare. When Bai Qing pounced on the chastity ring, A booming sound came from the sky as if a giant mountain had collapsed. Biqing doesn't seem to have many tricks up her sleeve. Since Bai Qing is already like this, Bei Sheng can't be that strong. Although Ni Quan was in the middle of the battle, his heart was elsewhere. He had many thoughts just like Ni Sheng from the Great Sage Hall. Along the way, he had been thinking about how to see Bai Qing's bottom line. Now that he saw that Bai Qing's 5 colors divine ability could no longer be used, he felt much more at ease. With such thoughts in mind, Ni Quan hurriedly said, "Brother Bai, don't be anxious. I'm here to help you." As he said that, Ni Quan swung his big tail. Together with Bai Qing, they formed a triangle and attacked Zhenjie's fat head from both sides. Seeing the two forces sealing the space around it, layers of void cracks appeared in the nearby space, entangling and swallowing each other. Zhenjie knew that although its kick could injure Peng Jun, it would definitely be kill. Zhenjie sighed secretly. It stretched out its hooves from the void and faced Ni Quan. The 9-toothed rake danced and struck toward Bai Qing. Gah! Peng Jun escaped from the desperate situation. Without hesitation, he let out a long cry and pounced toward Zhenjie again. Seeing that the 3 demon kings wanted to take revenge for the 5-colored sea god Shell clan, Zhenjie had no choice but to pull itself together and use all its tricks to fight against them. The wind blew and the clouds shook on the shore of the East Sea, and the waves surged to the sky. The 4 demon clans fought from the sky to the sea, and from the sea to the sky. Even though the moon was bright and the stars were sparse, their battle cries still shook the sky. Zhen Kong had already flown out from the sea and stood guard in front of Chun Zong with a magic wand in his hand. As for Dragon Horse Zhen Feng and Zhen Han, seeing how powerful the 3 demon kings were, they were already afraid. They looked at Zhenjie's divine ability anxiously. As long as Zhenjie showed less signs of being defeated, they would immediately go to the Immortal Palace and the East Sea Dragon Palace to call for reinforcement. When Peng Jun, Ni Quan, and Bai Qing came to the hidden Immortal Continent to take revenge, they had already investigated Chun Zong and his 4 disciples. They also knew that Zhen Kong was a fire ape that Xiao Hua didn't allow to be hurt. Therefore, even though Peng Jun's claw looked very powerful, it didn't hurt Zhen Kong at all. Zhen Kong flew out from the sea in confusion and hurriedly protected Chun Zong. His eyes were filled with envy as he looked at Zhenjie's battle with the 3 demon kings. Boom! Just as everyone had their own thoughts and were dazzled by the battle, a loud sound was heard. Then, catcher sounds of shattering echoed, followed by a miserable shriek. Bai Qing was the first to escape from the battle. On the incomparably hard shell, a huge pig's hoof print could be faintly seen. Around the hoof print, there were 3 large holes and many cracks. 2 of the 3 large holes were flowing with blood. After Bai Qing escaped from the battle, his figure immediately swayed and he flew towards the distance. Gah! Seeing that Bai Qing was injured, Peng Jun spread his wings. The sound of wind and thunder resounded. Similarly, dozens of afterimages appeared and flew towards the depths of the East Sea. Although Peng Jun was fast, Ni Quan, who had some understanding of Bai Qing's strength, was even faster. Bai Qing had just been injured by the 9-toothed rake. Before he could escape from the battle, an obscure fluctuation appeared on his horn. As his wings flapped, his figure had already entered the void and disappeared. Zhen Kong! Seeing that the 3 demon kings had retreated, Zhenjie shouted, "Protect Master well. This daddy will go and take the heads of these demon kings." After saying that, Zhenjie moved his figure and turned into a stream of light to chase after them. However, he disappeared along with the 3 demon kings in an instant. Eldest senior brother is truly formidable. Dragon Horse Zhen Feng flattered, "You actually managed to defeat the 3 archfiend kings. Seeing that your strength has already reached the highest realm in the 3 continents, you are truly a role model for us disciples. Eldest senior brother's strength has already reached the top." Zhen Han praised. "His dedication is worthy of us learning." He was already exhausted from fighting the 3 demon kings, but in order to eliminate any future troubles, he still mustered his courage and chased after them. However, with this spirit of not giving up until the goal is achieved, eldest senior brother is also a role model for us. Ch 2 bootlickers. Zhen Kong snorted coldly. There is no need to talk about senior brother Zhenjie's strength. But if we are talking about spirit, I feel that the possibility of him being lazy and sleeping is higher. Master, you have to be a witness. Dragon Horse Zhenfeng immediately complained. When eldest senior brother returns, I will tell him this. You are not allowed to say that I am complaining behind his back. This is what Zhen Kong said himself. Amitabha. Chun Zong chanted. Master was frightened and my body is also tired. Let us find a place to rest first. Yes, Master. Hearing that, Zhen Kong hurriedly agreed. Disciple will bring Master to the small fishing village and find a place to stay. No need. Chun Zong waved his hand. At dusk, you scared the children of others. How can we find a place to stay? It is better to find a place to stay outside. Yes, Master. Zhen Kong felt that it was reasonable. He raised his head and with a flash of golden light in his eyes, he could already see clearly. He used his finger to point at a place that was like a hill not far from the fishing village. There is a place to shelter from the wind. Master, you can rest there tonight. Amitabha, let's go there. Chun Zong nodded and walked towards the direction that Zhen Kong pointed. Zhen Kong flew over first and waved his magic wand to clean up the surroundings. After Chun Zong sat down cross-legged and began to chant Buddhist scriptures, he stood far away with his magic wand in his hand and was on guard. Not only did he release his essence to scout the surroundings, he even executed the eye-clearing technique. His eyes flickered with golden light, appearing exceptionally bright in the darkness. Ph. Too pretentious. Zhen Han and Dragon Horse Zhen Feng exchanged a glance and mocked. The three Archfiend Kings have already been beaten away by eldest senior brother. Which other Archfiend would be so blind as to come and seek death? The man and the horse laughed and also found a place to meditate. The curtain of night gradually lifted and the first rays of dawn slowly arrived. At the seaside where the battle took place last night, the sky was clear and boundless. The sun that had just begun to rise sprinkled its not-so-glaring brilliance onto the calm surface of the sea and also onto the fishing village. Caw, caw, caw. A rooster's crow sounded. Chun Zong, who had been meditating, moved his eyes slightly and was about to wake up. Seeing this, Zhen Kong's figure swayed and the dew on his shoulder dripped down. He was about to fly to Chun Zong's side. However, at this moment, he suddenly stopped and turned his head to look at the fishing village. In the direction of the fishing village, a beautiful woman wearing ordinary clothes and carrying a bamboo basket leisurely walked over. The woman's eyes were searching as she walked. When she saw Chun Zong's location clearly, joy appeared on her face and she quickened her steps. Hey! Zhen Kong roared and blocked the path with his magic wand. He raised his hand and pointed at the woman, saying, Bold Archfiend, why are you still not revealing your true form? The woman was stunned. With a hoarse voice, she hurriedly called out, Master, please spare my life. This concubine is the mother of the girl you met yesterday. Mo Cao has already told this concubine about yesterday's situation. This concubine knows that this concubine has misunderstood all of you masters. Thus, this concubine was afraid that this concubine would be hungry, so this concubine made some biscuits early in the morning to appease your hunger. Bullshit. Zhen Kong raised his magic wand and a cold wind swept up. He aimed it at the woman's forehead and shouted, If you are Mo Cao's mother, how did you know that my master is a mortal and needs to eat? P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chidian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all of your support. Chapter 4564. Master. That woman says pitifully, this concubine really does not know if you masters need to eat. However, this concubine thinks that since you are a human, you should eat. Last night on the sea was truly dangerous. Tuo Cao's father did not allow this concubine to come out. This concubine thought about it, and felt that if this concubine did not express her apology, TSK. Zhen Kong is truly furious. That magic wand of his falls a few more times but in the end, it does not fall. He holds back his killing intent and shouts, This daddy has already seen your true form. Stop pretending. If not for the fact that you know that my master is easily swayed, how would you dare to come over? If you still do not leave. Disciple. Chuanzang has already woken up. Looking over, he says unhappily. What is going on? Does this female benefactor have something to say? Damned Shen Han! Zhen Kong says angrily, why are you still not hurrying to protect master? Achoo! Zhen Han sneezes on a pile of firewood that looks like a dried tree trunk. She flips over and says, second senior brother, aren't you being too careful? Now that you have the reputation of eldest senior brother, which little demon would come looking for trouble? After getting up, Chuanzang tidies up his kasaya. Beside him, Longma Zhenfeng has already come over and says with a smile, Master, this is Tuokao's mother. She said that she is here to deliver the pancakes to Master to express her misunderstanding of us yesterday. Amitabha. Chuanzang reveals a smile. Putting his palms together, he walks over to where Zhen Kong is blocking that woman and says, female benefactor is too polite. We are all monks and do not eat meat. Please take this pancake back. As long as female benefactor is willing, this poor monk is already very grateful. Don't worry, master, that woman says with a smile. Tuokao has already said that master looks like a monk. This concubine did not use any meat oil when making the pancakes. Master. Zhen Kong is anxious. His figure flashes back slightly as he calls out, don't come over. This is a demon. Ah! Why is it a demon again? Chuanzang is startled. He unconsciously stands there and looks for a moment in disbelief. The woman obediently placed the basket on the ground and said, Master, if you have any doubts, I won't go over. After you've eaten the pancakes, you can leave the basket here. I'll ask Xiao Cao to come and get it, Zhenkong. Chuanzang grumbled, this woman is clearly the mother of the grass, how could she be, me? Zhen Kong snorted coldly. He turned to the side and said, Master, you're the one courting death. It has nothing to do with me, Zhenhan, Zhenfeng, just wait for Zhenjie to come back and roast you. Seeing that Zhen Kong had moved aside, the woman was overjoyed. However, just as she was about to take a step forward, Zhen Kong's demonic wand struck down from the sky. This strike was truly strange, and it was extremely powerful. The woman wanted to dodge, but she was completely enveloped by the wind generated by the demonic wand. There was no way for her to dodge. Pa! With a muffled sound, the woman's head and upper body were shattered. She died on the spot without even a scream. Chuanzang was startled. He looked at Zhen Kong in disbelief. Then, he looked at the woman who was smashed into meat paste. In an instant, an indescribable anger arose in his heart. Previously, Zhen Kong had killed many demons, including some Daoist cultivators. However, those demons and cultivators didn't die such a miserable death. Moreover, when he looked at the basket beside the woman's corpse, Chuanzang couldn't help but think of the fisherwoman he met when he first came to the hidden immortal continent from the Western Paradise, as well as the dry rations her family gave him. That fisherwoman wasn't here. After more than 200 years, she should have died long ago. However, how similar were the two fisherwomen? They were both kind to others, especially Xiao Cao's mother. Not only did she not blame Zhenjie for his evil deeds yesterday, she even brought pancakes. Not only did Zhen Kong not understand her intentions, he even killed her with a single strike. If she was a demon, why didn't she fight Zhen Kong? Why was she beaten to death for no reason? Seeing the change in Chuanzang's expression, Zhen Kong understood Chuanzang's anger. He raised his magic wand and swept it across the woman's corpse a few times. He pulled out a scarlet insect that was more than a foot long and as thick as a thumb. At this moment, the insect's surface was cracked and its insides had been smashed into paste by the magic wand. Zhen Kong said coldly, Master, this is called a control insect. It usually burrows into the 7 orifices of humans or demons and is controlled by it. The larva of this insect has the strength of a first-grade elemental power. The adult should have the strength of a 3rd or 4th grade elemental power. It flies like lightning. If this disciple let it fly another half a foot, Master would have already died. After saying that, Zhen Kong placed the magic wand on his shoulder. He ignored Chuanzang and landed on a distant hill. He looked up at the rising sun in the east with a yearning expression. You. Chuanzang looked at Zhen Kong's departing figure and then looked at the woman's corpse on the ground. He was so angry that he couldn't speak. After a moment, Chuanzang calmed down and chanted the rebirth mantra. He began to clean up the flesh on the ground. Zhen Kong looked at him coldly. Just as he was about to raise his hand and release a fire art, Zhenhan jumped out from the pile of firewood and flew to Chuanzang's side. She said respectfully, "Master, disciple is here to help you." Bootlicker. Zhen Kong sneered and looked to the east. It seemed to be where the Fortune Dao Palace was located. Zhen Kong was a fire ape. Before he was suppressed on the Dawn Rain continent, he killed countless humans and demons. Even after he escaped, he killed many humans and demons. In his eyes, there wasn't much difference between humans and demons. There was no difference between him killing a human and a demon. However, he didn't know how big of an impact it was for Chuanzang to kill a human in front of him. Moreover, Zhen Kong protected Chuanzang with all his might. He was afraid that Chuanzang would suffer a single injury. However, he didn't have any special respect for Chuanzang. He also didn't really treat Chuanzang as his master. He was only fulfilling the trust his true master had given him. While Chuanzang was an esteemed monk, he was also a human. Seeing that Zhen Kong had killed someone, he immediately stood to the side and pretended to be cultured. Even though he knew that what Zhen Kong said and did was not wrong, the anger in his heart would not dissipate so easily. Unfortunately, the matter was far from over. Before Chuanzang and Zhan Han could clean up the woman's corpse, two more people hurriedly appeared in the small fishing village. The person in front was a fisherman with messy hair and some white hair on his temples. The fisherman was pulling a short girl. Wasn't that Tuo Cow? Tuo Cow struggled with all her strength and didn't want to come over. However, the fisherman's face was ashen and he looked very angry. He pulled Tuo Cow and walked over. "Ha ha!" Dragon Horse Zhen Feng laughed and said, "My beloved second senior brother, look, you've caused a disaster. You killed his mother and wife, and now he's dragging his family to look for you. Let's see what you're going to give him as a wife. How about this? You stay in this small fishing village and sell yourself to Tuo Cow's father as a worker. When you've earned enough copper coins to give Tuo Cow another mother, you can chase after him, and continue to pray for scriptures in paradise." TSK TSK TSK. Zhen Kong was enraged. He revealed the ferocity of a fire ape at Dragon Horse Zhen Feng as he shouted, "Damn it, if you dare to say another word, do you believe that I won't beat you to death with my staff?" "Eldest senior brother." Dragon Horse Zhen Feng habitually shouted. However, just as he shouted, he realized that Zhen Jie had gone to hide. He hurriedly shut his mouth and hid his horse face under his buttock. "Quick, quick." Zhen Han naturally also saw Tuo Cow. He hurriedly raised his hand and flames appeared between his fingers. He said, "Master, please let this disciple clean up this mess." "No need." Chuanzang shook his head. "This matter must be explained to Tuo Cow and her father. After all, this woman is their relative. They should know. Whether they believe it or not, that's their problem. They are mortals." Zhen Han said helplessly, "How can they believe it?" "Amitabha, your master is also a mortal." Chuanzang chanted Buddha's name. "Whether they want to beat or scold, it's up to them." "Master." The fisherman approached and saluted from afar. "My wife just disappeared. I heard from my daughter that she was baking pancakes early in the morning. I didn't see her. Zhen Han waved his hand impatiently. "What does your wife baking pancakes have to do with us?" "Ah! Isn't this my family's bamboo basket?" The man originally wanted to explain with a smile. However, he inadvertently glanced around and immediately saw the bamboo basket by the side of the road. When he looked to the side, he saw clothes that were not completely buried. "Mother." Tuo Cow struggled to hide behind her father. However, when she saw the familiar clothes by the side of the road, how could she endure it? She immediately pulled her hand out of her father's hand and rushed to the side of the road. As she ran, tears from the corner of her eyes flowed down her cheeks and fell into the air. "Sigh, Amitabha." Chuanzang sighed and walked a few steps forward. He clasped his hands together and said, "Young benefactor, master, be careful." Zhen Han, who was at the side, was also moved. She hurriedly stood in front of Chuanzang and reminded him. "Mother." Tuo Cow ran too hastily and fell to the ground. Although there was a lot of sand around the fishing village, Tuo Cow's knees and elbows were still scratched and blood flowed out. Get out of the way. Chuanzang was anxious. He pushed Zhenhan and went around to help Tuo Cow up. Zhenhan hesitated and turned to look at Zhenkong. Zhenkong was not paying attention to them at all. He was only squinting his eyes and looking at the sun. Zhenhan understood that although Zhenkong was angry, she would definitely not stay out of the matter and let Chuanzang die. Zhenkong must have seen that Tuo Cow and her father were not controlled by the control bug. Therefore, Zhenhan only took a few steps forward and was on guard. She did not stop Chuanzang. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chidian to vote, recommend, bookmark, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 4565. To Chuanzang's surprise, even though Mo Cow's body was scratched, she was very agile. She rolled on the ground and immediately got up. Ignoring Chuanzang, she pounced towards the blood-stained clothes on the ground. My wife. The man also realized what happened. His face was filled with sorrow as he quickened his steps and followed behind Mo Cow. Chuanzang was very embarrassed. He took a deep breath and walked over. Benefactor, please listen to this poor monk's explanation. You. The man suddenly sped up and shouted, you killed my wife. You have to pay for my wife's death with your life. Oh no. Seeing the man's strange behavior, Zhenhan was shocked. He quickly opened his mouth and was about to spit out a mouthful of sword qi. However, at this moment, Chunzong was standing in front of him. Moreover, the fisherman had already spat out black gas from his nostrils. A black light like a control insect appeared in the black gas. Zhenhan's figure flashed. Just as she dodged Chunzong's attack, the sword qi in his mouth had already been spat out. At this moment, there was another thunderous sound. Kill. A rolling shadow of a staff swept past Chunzong's head. The powerful wave of qi not only pushed Chunzong to the ground, but even Zhenhan's figure staggered a few times and almost fell down. Under such a powerful staff shadow, the control insect was already smashed into several pieces. As for the fisherman behind the control insect, he was not spared either. Where the staff shadow disappeared, his upper body was also smashed into meat paste. Ah! Father! Mo Cow had just pounced in front of her mother's corpse. Before she could smell the familiar scent on her mother's clothes, she heard another sound behind her. She naturally turned around and saw her father, being smashed into pieces by a magic staff. Although Little Grass was a strong girl, she was still young. She only cried out once before she fainted. Zhenkong. Chuanzang stood up from the ground. His Pailu hat was already crooked. He did not care about his clothes and shouted, "What are you doing?" "Ah, you, why did you kill someone again?" Zhenkong's figure appeared in midair. He looked at Chuanzang and his eyes flashed with golden light. He looked at the fainted Mo Cow and seemed to be thinking about something. "Don't you dare." Chuanzang hurriedly stood in front of Mo Cow and said, "If you kill someone again, kill me first. She doesn't have a control insect on her. Why would I kill her?" Zhenkong sneered and pointed at the control insect corpse on the ground with his magic staff. "Take a look for yourself. Think about it. Didn't the black gas fly out of this person's nose?" With that, Zhenkong did not say anything else and he flew towards the fishing village. Although Zhenkong didn't say what they were going to do, Zhenhan understood that there was definitely something wrong with this fishing village, since control bugs kept appearing. So, Zhenhan shouted, "Zhen, be on your guard. Don't let the monster." Yes. Without Zhenjie and Zhenkong, Zhenfeng was very diligent. With a cry, he hurriedly poked his head out from under his butt and looked around. He even cried out, "Damn it, where did all the merit points from the Immortal Palace go? I must report them to Immortal Emperor Go Chen for being absent from work." Amitabha. Chuanzang's mouth was filled with bitterness. He squatted down and picked up Mo Cow's thin and weak body. He was really worried about how to explain himself after Mo Cow woke up. "Master," Zhenhan said softly, "these two control insects are really repulsive. The Pegasus only controlled the two adults and did not control the little girl. Second senior brother killed these two adults, and both of them were seen by this little girl. We have no way to explain ourselves. Why don't we kill the little girl as well? Forget it. Amitabha. Disgust appeared in Chuanzang's eyes. He glanced at Zhenhan and said, Zhenhan, you are now I's disciple and not a Confucian general. Don't break the precept. Chimpage. Zhenhan coldly snorted and didn't say anything else. She raised her hand and a cluster of flames appeared, burning the corpses of the fisherman and the woman on the ground, as well as the pancakes in the bamboo basket. Chuanzang opened his mouth and wanted to stop her. However, he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. In less than 5 minutes, Zhen Kong flew out of the fishing village. Chuanzang hurriedly asked, Amitabha, Zhen Kong, don't commit any more crimes. Why would I be so fierce for no reason? Zhen Kong waved his hand impatiently and said, if there weren't any monsters, I wouldn't have bothered to make a move. With that, Zhen Kong gloomily muttered to himself, this is strange. If there aren't any monsters in the fishing village, why would 2 control insects appear out of nowhere? Zhenhan glanced at Zhen Kong and said indifferently, you killed people and didn't clean them up. Instead, you asked me to clean them up for you. Now that I've cleaned them up, you can explain to Mo Cao yourself. With that, Zhenhan looked at the fishing village in the distance. At this moment, some fishermen had already poked their heads out, but none of them had the courage to come out. Chimph, what's there to explain? Zhen Kong sneered. I only care about protecting Master. I don't care about anything else. If you want an explanation, go and do it yourselves. Mother, father. At this moment, Mo Cao woke up. She called out and sobbed softly. Her small figure shrank into Chuanzang's embrace as she avoided Zhen Kong with a fearful gaze. A little girl had her family destroyed in just one morning. No matter how mature she was, she couldn't accept it. She even thought that she was dreaming. Amitabha. Chuanzang looked at the unconcerned Zhen Kong and said, Master is hungry. Mo Cao is also hungry. Go and ask for some karma. Yes, Master. Zhen Kong didn't say anything else. He looked at the fishing village in the distance and urged the cloud to fly away. F***ck. Chuanzang looked at the sky in the distance. The sun was already high up in the sky. He took a deep breath. There was a hint of nostalgia and sadness in his voice as he said, when I was still a child, I also had a father and mother at home. They loved me very much. However, one day, when Zhong Qingxiao massacred Yellow Flower Ridge, Jiang Liuer was still young. Xiao Hua originally thought that Jiang Liuer might not know the truth. However, Jiang Liuer clearly knew what happened that day. Although he didn't know who Jiang Liuer learned the truth from, or if he saw it with his own eyes, he could hear from Chuanzang's mouth that Chuanzang's knowledge and the truth were somewhat different. However, Xiao Hua wasn't here. Only Mo Cao, Zhenhan, and Longme Zhenfeng were listening at the side. Zhenhan and Longme Zhenfeng wanted to know Chuanzang's background from Chuanzang. Mo Cao sympathized with Chuanzang's experience. No one knew how serious the difference was. When Zhen Kong slowly flew back with a bamboo basket in his hand, Mo Cao's eyes were still filled with sorrow and hatred. However, the tears in her eyes had already dried up. Children from poor families were always able to adapt to life very quickly. They knew what to do when and what to do. Her parents had already been killed. What she needed to do now was to protect herself and tenaciously survive. Zhen Kong placed the bamboo basket in front of Chuanzang. After hesitating for a moment, he said, Master, I got this from the town in front. Please take a look and see if it's of any use. Chuanzang nodded and didn't answer. He removed the lining cloth on the bamboo basket and saw that there were some date cakes and other things that looked very pretty. A burst of heat and fragrance floated from the bamboo basket. Chuanzang didn't feel anything, but Mo Cao's stomach rumbled. Chuanzang picked up a date cake and placed it next to Mo Cao's mouth. He said kindly, You eat. Master, eat first. Mo Cao raised his hand and pushed it to Chuanzang's mouth without hesitation. Master has been enlightening me for a long time. I'm sure you're already hungry. Okay. Chuanzang saw that Mo Cao was so sensible and felt a little guilty. He picked up another piece and gave it to Mo Cao. Let's eat together. At this moment, Chuanzang didn't look like a monk at all. He was no different from a kind big brother. Mo Cao grinned and forced a smile. Okay, master. After Mo Cao wolfed down the date cake, Chuanzang slowly ate a few mouthfuls. Before Chunzong could do anything, Zhenkong flicked his finger and a jujube cake flew out of the basket and landed in Liao Cao's hand. Liao Cao was startled and its small body shrank back into Chunzong's kasaya. Zhenkong looked at Mo Cao's fearful eyes and said faintly, Master, Disciple has thought about it on the way here. Disciple has gone a little overboard today. However, Disciple was only trying to protect Master. The situation was urgent. Disciple doesn't know what you're thinking. However, since it has already happened, it's useless for Disciple to say anything. Master, do as you see fit. After saying that, Zhenkong's figure flashed and landed on the hillside. He no longer paid attention to Chuanzang. Amitabha. Seeing that Zhenkong was remorseful but his mouth was still unyielding, Chuanzang chanted Buddha's name. He couldn't eat the remaining date cake. Master, hurry up and eat. Chuanzang Kusama put down the date cake and hurriedly said, Eat until you're full so that you can go on your way. You eat. Chuanzang placed the date cake back into the bamboo basket and forced a smile. When you're done eating, this monk will send you home. Oh right, who else is in your family? At the mention of family, Mo Cao's small mouth twitched again. Tears fell from his eyes and he sobbed as he replied, There's no one else in my family. Young benefactor, do you have any relatives in the village? Chuanzang felt bitter and asked again. However, before Mo Cao could reply, Zhenkong, who was sitting on the hillside, suddenly jumped up from the ground. He waved the magic wand in his hand and hurriedly said, Damn it, there's no end to this. You too, hurry up and protect Master. Zhenhan was also shocked. He hurriedly flew over from afar and waved the weapon in his hand. His eyes flashed as he looked in the direction where Zhenkong was facing. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chijian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 4566. Dragon Horse Zhenfeng was as lazy as before. However, he also turned around to look, wanting to know which shameless demon or Daoist cultivator had come to court death this time. However, when they saw the demon flying over from afar, they couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. This was because another identical Zhenkong was carrying a peach tree on his shoulder and stepping on a demon cloud. He had a gloomy expression on his face as he flew back. The second Zhenkong was clearly a little absent-minded and didn't release his origin will to investigate. Instead, the first Zhenkong rushed into the sky and roared furiously, Damned demon! You actually dared to transform into my appearance and come over. See if I don't kill you. Ah! Zhenkong shuddered and looked in disbelief at the Zhenkong who looked exactly like him standing in front of him. He hurriedly shouted, Master. When the second Zhenkong saw that Chunzong was safe and sound, he threw the peach tree on the ground and roared furiously, Damned demon, you actually dared to transform into my appearance and come over. See if I don't kill you. When the second Zhenkong finished speaking, he was stunned. Not only were his words exactly the same as the first Zhenkong, his tone was also exactly the same. Even he himself couldn't tell the difference. Demon, hit as usual. The first Zhenkong roared and waved his magic wand at the second Zhenkong. The second Zhenkong was also furious. He roared and waved his magic wand, Demon, hit as usual. Oh my, there are actually 2 second senior brothers. Dragon Horse Zhenfeng laughed and said, Which monster race is this? Actually transforming into a fire ape. Is he really not afraid of death? Then, Dragon Horse Zhenfeng released his origin will and swept it across the 2 Zhenkongs. Hehe, interesting. Zhenhan sneered. Which great sage wants to pluck the peaches this time? Did he get the approval of the Immortal Palace and the Thunder Monastery? Naturally, Zhenhan sneered and, like Dragon Horse Zhenfeng, used the clear eyes technique to look at the 2 Zhenkongs. The dragon and the human were fine, but after looking at each other for a while, their expressions changed greatly. The 2 of them looked at each other with fear in their eyes. Neither of them dared to say another word. That was because the 2 Zhenkongs fighting before him not only had the same magic wand and the same techniques, even their strength was exactly the same. In fact, the two Jin Kongs couldn't even be distinguished by the clear vision light and origin sense. However, the dragon and man pondered for a moment and immediately understood that there was definitely something wrong with Jin Kong, who had returned earlier. Because it was impossible for the previous Jin Kong to give in, it was even more impossible for him to have come from the town to beg for alms. Only the Jin Kong who came back later, the one who followed his temper and brought back from a peach tree in the mountains, could be the real Jin Kong. But now, the two Jin Kongs were fighting. Who knew which one was the Jin Kong that returned first and which one was the Jin Kong that came later? Moreover, when they thought about the control worm that appeared in the fishing village and the grass in Chunzong's arms, Jin Han and the dragon horse Jin Feng shuddered. The trap that they had set for Jin Kong was definitely not small. A demon with such thoughts and the ability to transform into Jin Kong's appearance was definitely not someone they could deal with. Moreover, the sutra seeking extreme bliss had already reached its end after 200 years of suffering. Which demon would dare to come over and blatantly pluck the peaches at this time? If they didn't have a powerful background, Jin Han and the dragon horse Jin Feng wouldn't believe it even if they were beaten to death. Shrinking their necks, the dragon and man seemed to have felt a cold wind blowing on their bodies and felt somewhat cold. You too deserve to die. At this moment, one of the Jin Kong shouted, "Why aren't you coming over to help me? Come over quickly." The other Jin Kong also shouted, "This demon is troublesome. His strength is actually on par with me. If you don't come over to help, I won't be able to kill him." Hearing this, Jin Han immediately jumped into the air and opened his mouth. Sword Chi was about to fly out, but the flying sword only flew out half a kai. Jin Han was once again in a difficult position and said in a low voice, "Second senior brother, this little brother really wants to help you. But this little brother doesn't know which one is the real you." The dragon horse Jin Feng also jumped into the air and said in agreement, that's right. This little brother doesn't know which one is the real one. How can I help you? If I help this demon kill second senior brother, wouldn't our sutra-seeking extreme bliss become a joke? Saying this, the dragon horse Jin Feng turned his head and shouted, "Don't you think so, master?" Chunzong was naturally not stupid. The moment he saw the two Jin Kongs, he immediately understood what was going on. However, he was currently the same as Jin Han and the dragon horse Jin Feng, dumbfounded. Because he was unable to differentiate the two Jin Kongs. Which one was the real Jin Kong? He is the fake Jin Kong. One Jin Kong shouted. He opened his mouth and spat out a flame. The other Jin Kong also shouted, "You are the fake Jin Kong." Saying this, he also spat out a flame. The strangest thing was that when the two flames collided, they were extinguished at the same time. You dare to secretly learn this daddy's magic? See if this daddy doesn't beat you to death. One Jin Kong shouted and raised his magic wand again, while the other Jin Kong also shouted, "You dare to secretly learn this daddy's magic? See if this daddy doesn't beat you to death." The two Jin Kongs fought in the air again. Seeing that they didn't need to help, Jin Han and the dragon horse Jin Feng cleverly descended from the air. Jin Han held the crescent moon spade and stood on one side of Chunzong while the dragon horse Jin Feng swung his tail and stood on the other side. They seemed to be rather loyal. The two Jin Kongs fought from the sky to the ground, then from the ground to the sea, and then from the sea to the sky. Not only were the winds and clouds surging in the sky, even the calm surface of the sea was gradually surging with huge waves. The two Jin Kongs were still unable to determine the victor. Seeing the scorching sun in the sky, the two Jin Kongs knew that there wouldn't be any conclusion if they continued to fight like this. They both waved their magic wands and descended from the sky. However, the two Jin Kongs seemed to have a tacit understanding and landed a bit far from Chunzong. The two Jin Kongs stabbed their magic wands towards the ground and shouted, "Master, quickly tell us, which one is the fake Jin Kong and which one is the real Jin Kong?" Chunzong helplessly looked at the two identical Jin Kongs and said, "Master's eyes are mortal, how can I tell them apart?" Saying this, Chunzong turned his head and asked Jin Han and the dragon horse Jin Feng, "Disciples, which one do you think is the real Jin Kong?" "Master, we really can't tell." Jin Han and the dragon horse Jin Feng replied in unison, "Actually, Master can ask some secrets that only you and second senior brother know, damn it. Without waiting for Zhen Han and the dragon horse Zhen Feng to finish speaking, the two Zhen Kongs cursed together. Since it's a secret, how can Master ask it in person? If the fake Zhen Kong heard it, wouldn't he know? Ayo, that's right, Master, please don't ask. Zhen Han and the dragon horse Zhen Feng realized and hurriedly said to Chun Zong, let's wait for eldest senior brother to come back first. Alright, it seems like we can only wait for Zhen Jie to come back first. Chun Zong could only place his hopes on Zhen Jie, who was sleeping somewhere. However, they waited for more than half a day. Seeing that the sun was about to set, they still didn't see the shadow of that pig. Because of the fight between the two Zhen Kongs, the fishermen in the fishing village didn't dare to leave the village. Around the fishing village, there were some shelves made of withered branches. Most of them had fishing nets on them. These fishing nets were supposed to be put away last night, but because of the arrival of Chun Zong and the others, as well as the battle between Zhen Jie and the three demon kings, most of them weren't put away. At this moment, these shelves had collapsed due to the strong wind, and the fishing nets were scattered on the beach. Far away on the beach, there were some small boats. Originally, when the tide rose this morning, the fishermen in the fishing village would go out to sea as usual. However, because of the fight between the two Zhen Kongs, the fishermen didn't go out to sea. When the tide rose, some fishing boats were dragged by the seawater and drifted into the sea. Together with the fishing nets from before, most of them were floating not far away from the beach. Although these fishing boats and fishing nets weren't far from the beach, when the tide fell, they would probably drift into the depths of the East Sea. The owners of these boats would lose their boats, and their livelihood would be even more difficult in the future. Looking at the two identical Zhen Kongs staring at each other like fighting cocks, ready to fight at any time, Chun Zong sighed and once again looked at the distant sea. A layer of darkness appeared in the depths of the sea. Chun Zong, who had already passed through the East Sea 3 times, knew that a storm was coming. Master, Xiao Cao said in a low voice, there will be a storm tonight. If we don't put away the fishing boats now, they will turn into wood chips tomorrow morning. Amitabha. Chun Zong sighed and said, even at this time, young benefactor is still thinking about others. You are really kind. Master. Dragon horse Zhen Feng called from the side, let's find a place to hide from the rain. Who knows when eldest martial brother will come back this time? It's not the first time he went out to slack off. If the wind is calm, he might come back tomorrow. Now that there is a storm, he must be at the bottom of the sea somewhere. Chun Zong pondered for a moment. What dragon horse Zhen Feng said was the truth. Zhen Jie was loyal to Chun Zong, but he was also very lazy. When they first came down from the snowy mountain, he was fine, lying on dragon horse Zhen Feng's back to sleep every day. Later, Zhen Jie felt uncomfortable on dragon horse Zhen Feng's back, so he would find excuses to go out and fight demons from time to time. This fight would take at most 10 days, and at least a few days. However, at that time, Zhen Kong was there, so Chun Zong didn't feel that there was much difference. But now that Zhen Kong was in trouble, Zhen Jie went out to slack off. This small matter was a big deal. Let's go. Chun Zong stood up and said, let's go first. Don't block the fishermen's livelihood. If we don't go out to sea, I'm afraid that some families will be in trouble. Yes, Master. The two Zhen Kongs answered at the same time, very habitually. Damn it. The two Zhen Kongs, who had just rested for a while, were furious again. With a loud shout, they started to fight again. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chijian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 4567. Chun Zong was helpless and could only say to Zhen Han, disciple, go and pick up the fishing boats and nets scattered in the sea. Don't let them drift with the waves. Master. Zhen Han looked at the two Zhen Kongs fighting and said nervously, right now, I still can't tell which one is real and which one is fake. Disciple has to protect your safety and can't leave without permission. She. Longma Zhen Feng sneered, it's obvious that the one who came back first is fake. If he wanted to harm Master, he would have made a move already. Why wait until now? H, I think the one who came back later is fake. Zhen Han snorted, Zhen Feng, you are from the dragon race. Picking up fishing boats and nets from the sea is your specialty. You should be the one doing this. Bah. Longma Zhenfeng spat. I am the 10th prince of the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace. How can I do such a trivial thing? If the other princes of the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace were to know about this, how can I still keep my face? You are already being ridden by a pig. What face do you still want? Zhenhan retorted. However, he immediately looked at Chunzong, who was walking towards the sea, and shouted, Master, what are you doing? Amitabha. Master is going to do such a trivial thing, Chunzong said without turning his head back. Ayo, Master, don't be anxious. Disciple was just joking with junior brother. How could Zhenhan dare to let Chunzong go to the sea? He hurriedly said and flew above the sea. He raised his hand and grabbed the fishing boats and nets several li away. With a wave of his hand, he was about to throw them to the beach. Chunzong saw this and hurriedly shouted, Disciple, be careful. Don't break these fishing boats. You are really long-winded. Although Zhenhan was impatient, he still restrained his temper and flew to the beach and put down the fishing boats and nets. After one more grab, the entire surface of the sea was cleaned. Zhenhan's face was a little pale as she gasped for breath and said, Master, Disciple was fortunate enough to not disappoint you. Amazing. Third senior brother is really amazing. Longma Zhenfeng raised his hoof and praised with admiration. Gosh Tilda Chuanzang looked at the little girl and asked, We should be on our way. This penniless monk will send you back to the fishing village. But Liao Cao blinked and said, Master, if you send me back, I will starve to death. How is this possible? Zhenhan sneered. Although there are only 40 to 50 families in this small fishing village, there are still over 100 people. Wouldn't having a little girl like you mean having an extra pair of chopsticks? Besides, don't you know how to pick up seafood on the beach? Even if you were at home, would they just watch you starve to death? Maro Cow opened her mouth but didn't know how to explain. After a while, she pointed in the direction of the fishing village and said, Before the new year, there was a guy called Smelly Fish in our village. His parents went out to sea and didn't come back. He disappeared after that. Amitabha. Chuanjue chanted the name of Buddha. Zhua Cao's worries are not unfounded. These fishermen only relied on fishing for a living, and even a family of 3 might have problems filling their stomachs. How could they spare the energy to adopt a little girl? Not to mention Zhua Cao living alone. Who knows what kind of ancient people she would meet? In this era, people can only live for themselves. Conscience is about to disappear. This is also the reason why Master wants to bring the Mahayana Buddhist scriptures to the hidden immortal continent. So that under the illumination of Buddha's light, the world can become one. Master, do as you wish. Zhenhan casually replied. Zhenfeng. Chuanjue spoke again. Come here. Yes, Master. Zhenfeng replied. Just as he took 2 steps forward, he suddenly realized something and cried out in shock. Monk, what are you doing? Amitabha, Zhua Cao is still a child. Master wants to take her away, so naturally I have to ride on your body. Chuanjue replied indifferently. Dragon Horse Zhenfeng quickly retreated and shouted, How can this be? I am the 10th prince of the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace. How many people in this world can ride on my body? It is already good enough for me to become your disciple. You actually want a secular girl to ride on my body? You are humiliating me, humiliating my Eastern Sea Dragon Palace. Master. Zhenhan also frowned and said, If this Zhua Cao is a boy, then so be it. We can just bring her along. She is a girl. Although she is young, she is still a girl. I am afraid that it will be inconvenient to bring her along, right? That's right. Dragon Horse Zhenfeng retreated far away and shouted, Monk, if you do this, you will make that Eastern Sea conch girl who is infatuated with you sad. Amitabha. Chuanjue replied, Master will bring Zhua Cao along first. When we reach the city, I will find an honest family or a nunnery and let her stay there. Not good, not good. Zhenhan said anxiously, How can there be an honest family in this world? If Master leaves, who knows how they will treat Zhua Cao? A nunnery is even worse. Zhua Cao is still so young, how can she become a nun? Amitabha, Then I will leave this matter to you. Chuanjue smiled and said, the hidden immortal continent is the foundation of Confucian cultivators. The immortal palace must have a place to settle the old, the young, the sick, and the disabled. Since Sutra seeking in extreme bliss has the merit of Confucian cultivators, then Zhuo should also be one of the merit. Monk, you set a trap for me. Zhenhan was startled and became somewhat angry. Chuanjue was not angry and said indifferently, Amitabha, if the immortal palace is selling dog meat under false pretenses, then you naturally don't have to do it. With that, Chuanjue pulled Zhuo hand and said, Zhuo, follow this poor monk. Yes, master. Zhuo was very obedient. She stood up and looked at the fishing boat not far away with reluctance. She opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but in the end, she closed her mouth. Chuanjue was very attentive. After walking a few steps, he saw Zhuo's sad expression and woke up. He turned around and brought Zhuo to the fishing boat. Master, what are you doing? Dragon horse Zhenfeng asked hurriedly. Zhenfeng, you go and tidy up the scriptures. Carry the scriptures and other things on your body first. Chuanjue instructed, Zhenhan, you go with master to the fishing village and tidy up the things in Zhuo's house. After all, this is Zhuo's house. Don't let her grow up and forget the things in her house. Thank you, master. Zhuo heard this and tears flowed down her cheeks. No. Zhenhan wanted to say that he didn't want to go, but seeing Chuanjue's firm steps, he knew that he couldn't stop him. He thought for a moment and said, Master, you wait here. Zhuo, come with me. With that, Chuanjue raised his hand and took Zhuo into his hand. He stepped on a cloud and impatiently flew to the sky above the fishing village. When Zhuo pointed at the straw hut, Chuanjue waved his hand and put the entire straw hut into his chenkuan bag. The fishermen in the fishing village were all afraid and hid in their houses, not daring to come out. Zhuo saw Chuanjue's divine ability and her eyes lit up. She hurriedly shouted, Uncles, I am Zhuo. My parents were killed by demons and unfortunately met with misfortune. I met a kind monk and they promised to take me to another place to settle down. You don't have to worry. When I grow up, I will come back to see you. Chuanjue was extremely impatient, but after hearing Zhuo's words, he couldn't help but look at Zhuo. After all, this child at such a young age was more meticulous than his age. It was indeed rare. However, Chuanjue didn't think too much about it. After flying back, he told Chuanjue. Chuanjue nodded with a smile. He held his staff in one hand and the little Zhuo in the other. He looked at the direction, then looked at the two Zhenkongs who were still fighting in the sky and left. Who is the real one? Who dares to steal my merit? Longma Zhenfeng carried the scripture on his back and looked at the battle in confusion. However, after a moment, he shook his tail and sneered, What does this have to do with me? My merit won't be any less. After saying that, Longma Zhenfeng followed behind Chuanjue. However, after a moment, Longma Zhenfeng cursed, Damn it! Why aren't there 2 chastity rings? This scripture is as light as a feather compared to the chastity rings. Chimpage. Behind Longma Zhenfeng, Chuanjue's voice came again, Even if there are 2 chastity rings, won't you still have to carry whoever is killed? Longma Zhenfeng snorted and said with a smile, What if the fake one kills the real one and the fake one isn't lazy? Maybe he won't ride on my back and show off his prowess. You're dreaming. Chuanjue sneered, How can the fake kill the real one? Do you think that there are so many 8th grade peak elemental energy experts in this world who would come and join in the fun? That's right. Longma Zhenfeng was also interested and said in a low voice, Chuanjue, between the 2 Zhenkongs, which one is the real one and which one is the fake one? Nonsense, the one who came back first is the fake one, the one who came back later is the real one. Chuanjue replied without thinking. Longma Zhenfeng was displeased, You're the one who's talking nonsense. Can't you have a nice chat? The night is long and the stars are shining brightly. Don't you want to talk about the biggest secret of immortals, Buddhas, and demons? What's there to talk about? Chuanjue sneered, We're all chess pieces. Fate is never in the hands of chess pieces. No, you don't understand what I mean. Longma Zhenfeng laughed, What I mean is, between the 2 Zhenfengs, One is the real one and the other is the fake one. Or are both the real one and the fake one? Why did he appear at this time? Oh. Zhenfeng, what do you mean? Chuanjue's curiosity was piqued and she asked curiously, quickly say it. We just came out from the Eastern Sea. Could it be that you got some news? Guesses are guesses. Third senior brother, you can't slander me. Longma Zhenfeng was somewhat displeased. Although I came from the Eastern Sea, I didn't see the dragon race from the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace. I didn't even see a single marine race from the Dragon Palace. Eldest senior brother can testify to this. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chijian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 4568. Alright. Zhenhan smiled and said, aren't we fellow disciples? I'm just joking with you, don't take it to heart. He, senior brother. Longma Zhenfeng chuckled and asked, I'm just joking. Think about it, Zhenkong wasn't originally in the sutra seeking extreme bliss. He was the monk's disciple. This disciple received a lot of merit, and the two of us talked about it before. But now, we still don't know where this fire ape came from. Do you think it's possible that some great sage of the thousand beast sacred realm couldn't stand this fire ape and sent all the beast clans to kick him out of the sutra seeking extreme bliss? Of course, Zhenhan replied without hesitation, this is the most likely scenario. Moreover, Zhenhan glanced at Longma Zhenfeng and said meaningfully, Junior brother, don't you think that the appearance of this fake Zhenkong has a lot to do with the East Sea Dragon Palace's peace? Hiss. Longma Zhenfeng couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air and said in shock, Senior brother, you mean? Since you've already guessed this possibility, why do you need me to say more? Zhenhan smiled and didn't say anything. Don't. Senior brother. Longma Zhenfeng thought of another possibility and couldn't help but feel bad. He quickly smiled and said, I'm just a bystander, so why don't you say it? Zhenhan rolled his eyes and said ambiguously, it's your beast clan's matter, why do you need me to say it? Although I don't know what happened in the East Sea Dragon Palace, you should be glad that there are two Zhenkongs and not two Zhenfengs. Ari, that's right, I didn't think about it at first, but now that senior brother said it, I know. Zhenfeng seemed to have some lingering fear in his heart as he replied, it's possible that the great sage of the Great Sage Hall went back on his word. Something happened between the Great Sage Hall and the East Sea Dragon Palace. Fortunately, the East Sea Dragon Palace didn't abandon me, the 10th prince. That's right. Zhenhan smiled and said, you're still the 10th prince of the East Sea Dragon Palace, unlike this fire ape who doesn't have any background. At this point, Zhenhan's heart skipped a beat, and he hurriedly transmitted his voice, that's not right. Zhenfeng, do you still remember the snowy mountain? Nonsense, who doesn't remember the Great Snow Mountain? Namo Metria Buddha achieved enlightenment and Zhenjie became our senior brother. Speaking of the Great Snow Mountain, Dragon Horse Zhenfeng immediately thought of its own bloody history and became somewhat angry. Do you think that Daoist Xiao is Zhenkong's backer? Zhenhan reminded. I remember that Daoist Xiao treated Zhenkong quite well back then. Are you kidding me? His Zhenjie's backer. Dragon Horse Zhenfeng said disapprovingly, that day, that human didn't say anything to Zhenkong, and he even cursed at him a lot. The funniest thing is that the fire ape didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and wanted to ask that human for a magic treasure. Wasn't it rejected by the human? That's true. Zhenhan nodded and said, if Daoist Xiao has a backer, it's not a big deal to give him a magic treasure. Moreover, Daoist Master Xiao rejected him very tactfully. With one look, I can tell that he is not on the same side as Zhenkong. You humans are really laughable. Dragon Horse Zhenfeng mocked, a rejection is a rejection. Why did you say when you are done with the sutra seeking extreme bliss, come and ask me for it and I will keep it for you? That's too fake. Hehe, why else would I be a human? There are a lot of ways of the world that you monsters don't understand. Zhenhan replied with a mischievous smile. I am a dragon, the 10th prince of the East Sea Dragon Palace, not a monster. Dragon Horse Zhenfeng corrected again. These words, he had probably said it more than 2,000 times in the 200 years he had spent in the sutra seeking extreme bliss. Junhan didn't mind. He raised his head and looked at the two Zhenkongs in the distant night sky and said with a smile, "In my opinion, this fake Zhenkong was sent by the great sage palace to kill Zhenkong and seize his merit." "That's not right." Dragon Horse Zhenfeng was about to nod, but he suddenly thought of something and said in confusion, "If this is the work of the great sage palace, why didn't they lure Zhenkong to a secret place and kill him before letting the fake Zhenkong come back?" "That's right, that's true." Zhenhan also didn't understand, but then he asked curiously, "If that's not the case, then how do you explain those three monsters with 8th grade essence energy? Weren't they sent by the great sage palace to lure the tiger away from the mountain?" "It's getting more and more complicated." Dragon Horse Zhenfeng kicked his front hooves and said, "If it isn't the great sage palace, then could it be the immortal palace?" "How could it be the immortal palace?" Zhenhan didn't understand what Dragon Horse Zhenfeng was thinking. "Look, nothing happened at the Sutra world, but when we arrived at the hidden immortal continent, before we even set foot on the ground, the three monster kings came." Dragon Horse Zhenfeng said with a smile, "Then eldest senior brother disappeared. The control insect came and the real Zhenkong was discovered. And the merit officer who should have appeared, has yet to appear. Do you think the immortal palace did this on purpose?" "Hee hee." Zhenhan smiled and said, "Even if my immortal palace wanted to do something, we would definitely not use a monster as an excuse. Not to mention, using such despicable methods. There are 3 reasons why there are no merit officers of the immortal palace." "Oh, there are actually 3 reasons?" "Third senior brother, let's hear it." Dragon Horse Zhenfeng said with interest. "First of all, this sutra seeking in Sutra world is a Buddhist sutra. It has nothing to do with my immortal palace and Confucian cultivators. Why would the merit officers of my immortal palace care about it? Tell me, then what?" "Then, since eldest senior brother came from the Great Snow Mountain, those so-called tribulations are no longer tribulations. The sutra seeking in Sutra world has been smooth sailing. Even the Thunder Temple's protector has slacked off, not to mention the merit officers of my immortal palace. What else? It's possible that the merit officers of the Thunder Temple are negotiating with the Thunder Temple's protector." Zhenhan smiled and pointed to the sky. "Maybe they don't like each other and are killing each other." "Hee hee." Dragon Horse Zhenfeng also smiled and said the same thing as Zhenhan. "The 3 reasons that third senior apprentice brother mentioned sound reasonable. Moreover, the immortal palace will also have misgivings about their face and won't use such despicable methods. However, don't forget that on the hidden immortal continent, there are still the 4 great clans and the 100 clans. If this is the case, third senior brother, you are just lucky." Zhenhan's sweat dripped down from his forehead. His situation was very similar to Dragon Horse Zhenfeng's. It was just that his status was a bit more official than Dragon Horse Zhenfeng's. If the 4 great clans really went back on their words and wanted to take advantage of the situation, he might really become a sacrifice. However, since there are 2 Zhenkongs, Zhenfeng and Zhenhan looked at each other again, and a knowing smile appeared on their faces. They whispered to each other through telepathy, "Then the danger we're in is gone." However, a moment later, Zhenhan whispered, "From the looks of it, we have temporarily avoided the danger. However, we still have to be careful. Before the truth comes to light, anything is possible. Everyone sweeps the snow in front of their own door. Don't worry about the frost on the roof of others." Draconic Horse Zhenfeng was naturally very interested in this matter and whispered, "Who cares who is the real Zhenkong and who is the fake Zhenkong? Protecting ourselves is the right thing to do." Chunzong pulled Tuo Cow and walked at the front. Although he was not much faster than Dragon Horse Zhenfeng and Zhenhan, he still couldn't hear the words of his 2 disciples. He also didn't understand the thoughts of his 2 disciples. He also didn't know that although he had obtained the sutra that could illuminate the hidden immortal continent, could the people who schemed and plotted against each other really let the Mahayana Sutra illuminate the hearts of the people? The night was extremely dark. There were no stars in the sky. Behind them, a gale gradually formed on the sea and a whistling sound gradually sounded. However, this whistling sound couldn't cover up the crackling sound of fighting above Chunzong's head. Occasionally, there would be a loud sound in the distance. It was unknown which Zhenkong was knocked to the ground. Then, there would be the sound of hills being smashed and trees being pushed down. Tuo Cao barely managed to walk for an hour. Then, Chunzong carried Tuo Cao and walked for another hour. Chunzong couldn't hold on anymore. His body was sweating profusely. He stood on the dark road and looked around. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. However, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. This smile was really meaningful. Even Mahavairokkana probably couldn't understand the meaning behind it. Jinhan. Chunzong turned his head and looked at Tuo Cao, who was sleeping on his shoulder. He said, "Go find a place to rest." "Yes, master." Jinhan responded. She looked up at the fighting in the night sky and flew up slightly. Her eyes flashed with a clear light. She pointed with her finger and said, "Master, there is a shabby cottage over there. No one lives there. Why don't we go there?" "Okay." Chunzong nodded and was about to walk in that direction. Zhenhan looked at Chunzong and said in a low voice, "Master, give Tuo Cao to Disciple. Disciple will bring her there and tidy up the cottage." "Amitabha. Go and tidy up. Tuo Cao is sleeping soundly. Don't wake him up." Chunzong panted and replied. Zhenhan smiled and said, "Master, you underestimate Disciple. How can Disciple wake Tuo Cao?" Then, Zhenhan raised her hand and Tuo Cao gently floated up. Chunzong smiled and let Zhenhan fly away with Tuo Cao. He didn't know when the fighting in the sky ended. Chuanzang only knew that when he woke up from his meditative state, the entire thatched hut was rattling. The salty sea breeze was blowing outside, and heavy rain was pouring down. The entire thatched hut seemed to be about to be overturned by the storm. The storm had finally come. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chijian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 4569. Amidst the wind and rain, Mo Cao curled up her small body and laid beside Chuanzang. Even the wind and rain couldn't wake her up from her dream of having parents. Looking at the smile on Mo Cao's face, Chuanzang sighed and stood up. As soon as Chuanzang moved, the originally closed wooden door opened with a loud bang. A gust of wind mixed with the cold rain rushed into the thatched cottage. Chuanzang hurriedly stood to the side and blocked the rain that landed on Mo Cao's body. However, a gust of cold wind still woke Chang Cao up. She rubbed her eyes and was about to act coquettishly when the smile on her face disappeared. Returning to reality, she hurriedly stood up carefully and stood beside Chuanzang like a maidservant. "Master." Outside the cottage, the two Zhenkongs each held a magic wand and stared at each other. They spoke in unison, "Tell me which one of us is the real one and which one is the fake one." "The real one stays, the fake one, scram." Although the torrential rain outside the cottage was heavy, layers of demonic aura were generated in the space a few feet around the two Zhenkongs. The demonic aura was scorching hot like flames, preventing the torrential rain from landing on the two Zhenkongs. However, the two Zhenkongs were covered in mud and even had some bloodstains. It was obvious that they were injured during the fight. Chuanzang looked at them and felt his heart ache. After listening to the two Zhenkongs, he understood that the two Zhenkongs were exactly the same. Neither of them could defeat the other. That was why they came to such a compromise. Unfortunately, Chuanzang looked at them again and again. After the time it took to finish a meal, he spoke, "Disciple, I really can't tell. Who is the real Zhenkong? You need the heavenly eye of Buddhism to be able to tell, right? Can't both of you fly? If you can, go to Lei Yin Temple. Mahavairokkana should be able to tell the difference." "Monk." To Chuanzang's surprise, the two Zhenkongs spoke at the same time. "You think I've been protecting you all this time? Now that I need your help, you can't even tell who is the real one and who is the fake one." Chuanzang was not surprised by Zhenkong's lack of respect. What he found strange was that the two Zhenkongs actually spoke the same word. He said helplessly, "Oh Zhenkong, you've seen it for yourself. It's not that I don't want to help you. Whatever you want to say, that fake knows in advance. Even the way you speak is the same. How can I tell the difference?" "If that's the case," the two Zhenkongs said at the same time, Let's go find the Virokana revered one. Monk, be careful along the way. Go, master will wait for you here. Chun King nodded and replied. Hehe, monk, do you think Lei Temple is a small fishing village? The two Zhenkongs mocked. It'll take months or even years for us to make a round trip. You'd better go on your own. I see. Chuanzang was stunned. If that's the case, why don't you wait until Zhenjie comes back? Him? The two Zhenkongs sneered. If only he could see through it. Then. Chunzong hesitated and asked, this is already the hidden immortal continent. Can the immortal palace help? That's right, that's right. Hearing this, the two Zhenkongs were overjoyed and shouted, damn Zhenhan, why aren't you hurrying to find the merit cow on duty? Second senior brother. Zhenhan smiled bitterly. With such strong winds and heavy rain, where do you want me to find? Without waiting for him to finish, the two Zhenkongs raised their wands and said, damn it, if you dare to say another word, I'll beat you to death. Seeing that the two Zhenkongs were angered, Zhenhan did not dare to stay out of it. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, second senior brother, don't be anxious. I'll go and find the merit cow on duty now. Hurry back. The patience of the two Zhenkongs had long been worn out. He waved his wand and said, be careful of my wand. Yes, yes. Zhenhan hurriedly nodded his head and hurriedly left on his cloud. Damn it. The eyes of the two Zhenkongs turned blood-red, and there were flames within the blood-red eyes. Both of you are useless. You can't even see through a demon. Fight. As he said that, the two Zhenkongs started fighting again. Seeing the two fire apes fighting in the air again, Chunzong carefully closed the door. However, before he could turn around, Xiao Cao's words gave him a fright. Mars. Master. Xiao Cao's voice was as soft as a mosquito. I know who is the real one. What? Chunzong was shocked. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and covered Xiao Cao's mouth. He said in a low voice, do you want to die? Don't say it out loud. That fake one can beat you to death with a single blow. Xiao Cao nodded her head sensibly and pursed her lips. At this moment, one of the two Zhenkongs who were fighting suddenly glanced at the thatched cottage below him and a ferocious glint appeared in his eyes. That figure actually had the intention to descend. However, the other Zhenkongs was fighting excitedly. He was entangling this Zhenkongs tightly. This fake Zhenkongs also managed to extricate himself in a short period of time. After a while, the two of them flew high into the dark clouds. The sounds of fighting gradually disappeared. Hearing that there was no movement outside, Chunzong lowered his voice and said, Xiao Cao, wait for a while. Wait for my eldest disciple to return. Xiao Cao nodded her head again. Chunzong looked at the wind and rain outside the cottage and asked in bewilderment, Xiao Cao, you? How can you tell? Xiao Cao looked at Chunzong and hesitated for a while. She said in a low voice, because he is really my enemy. I must remember him. I want to avenge my parents. Amitabha. Chunzong's heart was filled with mixed feelings. He said, Xiao Cao, how about this poor monk recite a scripture for you? Sure, master. Xiao Cao nodded. Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, when he walked the deep prajna parameter for a long time, he saw that the 5 skandhas were all emptiness. He transcended all suffering. Chunzong placed his palms together and recited softly. Xiao Cao's face was filled with confusion. She did not know what Chunzong was reciting, but she listened obediently. Boom. At this time, a loud sound came from outside the cottage. It was unknown whether it was the wind and rain or the aftermath of the battle, but the roof of the cottage was suddenly lifted and the wind and rain poured in. Chunzong immediately understood what happened. He did not hesitate and pulled Xiao Cao into his arms. There was no fear on his face. He raised his head and looked at the wind and rain while chanting the Heart Sutra of Prajna Paramita. Clap, clap, clap. The sound of the magic wands hitting each other was endless. Soon after, the sound gradually faded away. However, Chunzong was not at ease. He still protected Xiao Cao in front of his chest, blocking the wind and rain and danger. Damn it. Longma Zhenfeng's voice came from outside the cottage. I wanted to be idle for a while, but you had to drag me out. I am the 10th prince of the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace. Now, I have become a craftsman repairing a cottage. Following Longma Zhenfeng's voice, the roof that was previously lifted returned and blocked the wind and rain. Master, are you all right? Dragon Horse Zhenfeng was very thorough in evading. He didn't even want to meet Zhenkong face to face. After asking this question, before Chunzong could reply, he had already disappeared. Chunzong's body was already soaked, but he did not dare to be careless. He did not dare to move his body and continued to protect Xiao Cao while chanting the sutra. 2 hours later, the rain gradually lessened and the wind weakened. In the distant sky, Zhenhan flew over with 2 earthen lords. Damn it! The 2 Zhenkong's eyes flashed with golden light at the same time as they cursed, useless things, why did you find 2 earthen lords? However, the 2 Zhenkongs stopped at the same time. One of them glanced at the cottage that was gradually getting further away and seemed to be calculating something in his heart. Second senior brother. Zhenhan shouted, this little brother has found the land of the immortal palace. Useless things, can they tell who is fake? The 2 Zhenkongs did not hesitate to curse. Second senior brother, you don't know. Zhenhan smiled, I also have no way to find the earthen lords on duty. The only one I can find is the earthen lords. However, I heard from these 2 earthen lords that they met the earthen lords on duty yesterday. They should be dealing with the Buddhist sect's guardian heavenly kings and venerables. They will be back soon. How long? One Zhenkong said impatiently while the other Zhenkong looked at the cottage. Seeing that the fake Zhenkong did not say anything, the real Zhenkong suddenly turned his head and looked at the fake Zhenkong. The fake Zhenkong laughed coldly, what are you looking at? You fake, when the earthen lords on duty come, you will be exposed. Ha ha ha. The real Zhenkong used his hand to hit his chest and shouted, what a joke, what a joke. Between the 2 of us, who is the one who is afraid? Could it be that you are thinking of escaping? Ha ha ha. The fake Zhenkong used his hand to hit his chest and said, how can I be afraid? Masters. The 2 earthen lords said with a smile, we have already sent a message to the earthen lords on duty. I believe that they will be back soon. Good, good, good. We will wait here. The 2 Zhenkong spoke at the same time. Hearing this, the 2 earthen lords felt their hair stand on end. This was because the 2 fire apes were saying the same words and doing the same actions at the same time. It was truly strange. This wait lasted for a whole hour. The 2 Zhenkong scratched their ears and cheeks anxiously. This was especially so for one of them. His eyes would occasionally flash with an ominous glint as if he was looking at the 2 earthen lords. However, in reality, he was looking at the ground. Needless to say, this was definitely the fake Zhenkong. He had already heard the words of the earthen lords and wanted to get rid of the earthen lords. If there was only the real Zhenkong, he would not hesitate to rush down and kill the earthen lords. In fact, he had already tried flying down earlier. However, the real Zhenkong was watching him closely. As long as he moved, the real Zhenkong would fight him. Moreover, the earthen lords were being protected by Chuanzang. The fake Zhenkong would not be able to kill the earthen lords in a short period of time. Furthermore, the 2 earthen lords said that the earthen lords on duty were about to arrive. The fake Zhenkong was unable to grasp who the earthen lords were, what their cultivation level was, and when they would arrive. He was afraid that the moment he landed, the reward would arrive and mess up all the arrangements he had painstakingly made. Therefore, he hesitated again and again. It was during this little bit of hesitation that an hour passed. Looking at the storm and the sky revealing the light, the fake Zhenkong almost didn't dare to believe it. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chidian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all of your support. Chapter 4570. Damn it. The fake Zhenkong cursed angrily. He finally made up his mind to attack regardless of the consequences. Unfortunately, as soon as he moved, the real Zhenkong, as he expected, thought that he was going to attack. He also cursed and rushed over with his magic wand. Roar, Do you think I am afraid of you? The fake Shen Kong roared furiously. His magic wands rained down like rain, and his body rapidly plummeted to the ground. Swoosh! Right at this moment, four dignified gazes swept over. The moment they landed on the two Shen Kongs, they couldn't help but be stunned. Immediately after, four voices came from afar in unison. What is going on? Why are there two Shen Kongs? Along with the voice, boom boom. Righteous chi rushed down from the sky like a torrent, enveloping the space around the two Shen Kongs. Within this righteous chi, two Confucian generals in battle armor and two Confucian cultivators in official robes flew over on auspicious clouds. Before they could land, Junhan smelled a trace of mellow wine fragrance from the righteous chi. Damn it! Junhan cursed in a low voice and looked at the two Earth Lords. The two Earth Lords seemed to have smelled something and their faces looked awkward. They looked at each other and hurriedly moved forward to greet the four Earth Lords. This lowly one greets the four merit officers. Damned Earth Lords! The one in front was a Confucian cultivator wearing a red official robe. He had a fat head and big ears. His stomach was slightly protruding and the wings on his official hat were slightly swaying. Under the hat, he had a red face and a pair of eyes that were even more protruding than his stomach. This Confucian cultivator was holding an object that looked like an imperial tablet. When he saw the two Earth Lords bowing, he scolded, "The sutra-seeking state of bliss has just arrived at my hidden immortal continent and there is such a huge anomaly. Why didn't the two of you report it? How should the two of you be punished?" The two Earth Lords panicked and hurriedly reported, "Four merit officers, this lowly one didn't know that the sutra-seeking state of bliss had passed by this lowly one. Furthermore, the sutra-seeking state of bliss is not within this lowly one's responsibility." What? The merit officer was angry and scolded, "The sutra-seeking state of bliss is a huge matter of my immortal palace and thunder monastery. How can it not be within your responsibility? Aren't you neglecting your duties by saying such things?" The other landlord was even more straightforward. "This lowly one has already sent the information about this place to Sir Merit Officer 2 hours ago." Oh! The Merit Officer was startled. He turned his head to look at the other Confucian general who was wearing battle armor and holding a hatchet in his hand. He asked curiously, "Merit Officer on duty, is there such a thing?" The Merit Officer's face was also slightly red, but his expression didn't change. He faintly replied, "Lord Merit Officer, I have received some messages, but I don't know which one is from the local land. After all, we have to deal with the Buddhist sect's guardian heavenly kings. There are too many things, and it's difficult to deal with them one by one." As he spoke, the Merit Officer on duty took out a few small booklets that looked like memorials. He casually flipped through them a few times and took out one of them. He opened it and nodded. "Indeed, it has been issued. Millimeter, since that's the case, you are all innocent." The Merit Officer came to a conclusion. He looked at the ground and said proudly, "Thank you, my lord." The two landlords finally heaved a sigh of relief. Then, they immediately asked, "My lord, we still have duties to do. Do you think we can leave first?" "Leave?" The Merit Officer on duty glanced at the two Shen Kongs who were still fighting fiercely. He faintly said, "Is there anything more important in the hidden immortal continent than sutra seeking in nirvana?" The two landlords didn't know how to answer. Junhan hurriedly said, "Lord Merit Officer on duty is right. Sutra seeking in nirvana came from nirvana to the hidden immortal continent. Previously, everything was in order in nirvana, but when it came to our hidden immortal continent, there was a problem. If our immortal palace didn't handle it properly, it would damage the face of us Confucian cultivators." That's right. The other old man wearing an official's robe praised. "The two of you also wait here for orders." "Yes, Lord Merit Officer on duty." The two disciples knew that this was Lord Merit Officer of the Four Seasons action to share the responsibility, but they couldn't do anything about it. They could only respond and respectfully stand at the side. "Chimpage." The Merit Officer on duty snorted coldly. He waved his hand and a dozen inscription chains as thin as a thumb appeared. They circled around in the nearby space. He said, Where did this Evildor come from? He actually dares to disturb the order of our immortal palace's sutra seeking in nirvana? Hurry up and capture him. When the two Kongs who were fighting fiercely saw this, joy appeared on their faces. At the same time, they put away their magic wands and flew up to the clouds. They shouted, "Old Merit Officer, you guys are finally here. Hurry up and let us see which one is real and which one is fake." Damn it. The Merit Officer on duty cursed in a low voice. He raised his head and looked at the sky, which was filled with mottled clouds. It was as if he disdained to speak with the two Kongs. Chimpage. The Merit Officer on duty didn't speak. The Merit Officer on duty shouted, "Where did this Evildor come from? He actually dares to disturb the order of our immortal palace's sutra seeking in nirvana? If you kneel down and beg for mercy now, we can still let you go. We might not necessarily capture you and bring you to the immortal palace. When we find you, you can blame us for being ruthless and killing you on the spot. Hurry, hurry." The two Kongs shouted at the same time. "Hurry up and use your divine abilities to find that damned Evildor." Kong. The Merit Officer on duty didn't use his divine abilities. Instead, he said coldly, "I have already heard from the Guardian Heavenly King that ever since you participated in the Sutra seeking in Nirvana, you have protected Chuanzang's safety. However, along the way, you have killed many Yarrow and Daoist cultivators. Is it because you have killed too many Yarrow that he changed his appearance to harm you? Think about it yourself. Which powerful Yarrow have you offended?" Old Merit Officer. The two Kongs immediately became angry. However, they still restrained themselves and said, "Are you here to capture the Evildor? Or are you here to judge my merits and demerits? The number of Yarrow and Daoist cultivators I have killed has nothing to do with you. You have no right to judge my merits and demerit. How dare you?" The Merit Officer on duty roared. "You are merely a Yarrow. You are already extremely lucky to have the qualifications to participate in the sutra seeking in nirvana. You actually dare to say such insolent words? Scram." The two Kongs were furious. "Don't try to act sanctimonious in front of me. If you have the ability, then find the fake Kongs. If you don't, then hurry up and scram. When we kill our way into the immortal palace, we will let the immortal emperor punish your criminals." With that, the two Kongs moved and were about to fly towards the depths of the hidden immortal continent. Wait. The Merit Officer on duty naturally wouldn't let the two Kongs leave. He retracted his gaze and glanced at them arrogantly. "Vile spawn, since you are not willing to grab this last chance, then don't blame me for being impolite." As he spoke, the Merit Officer slapped his forehead. His eyes flashed with a silver light, and a cold light shone down, covering the two Chens. However, a moment later, the Merit Officer's face was filled with surprise. He said, "Sirs, let's use the Four Seasons all-seeing technique at the same time." "It can't be." The Merit Officer on duty was astonished. However, when he saw the Merit Officer on duty's expression, he immediately shut his mouth. A bronze color appeared in his eyes. As for the Merit Officer on duty and the Merit Officer on duty who had been silent all this time, a clear light appeared in their eyes and landed on the two Kongs at the same time. Not to mention the four Merit Officers, even Zhun Han could clearly see that under the Four Seasons detection technique, the color of the entire space seemed to have faded. Layers upon layers of light were extinguished and only black and white colors were left. Unfortunately, within the inscription chains, there were two identical Kongs. Although their hair and clothes were gone, the two fire apes with flickering flames around their bodies were still the same. Cough cough. A moment later, the Merit Officer on duty coughed and the clear light disappeared. He then said, "Zhen Kong, your situation is rather special. The four of us still need to study it." "Bullshit." The two Zhen Kongs roared, "I've seen many people who don't do a single thing. However, this is the first time I've seen someone as shameless as you. If you have the ability to distinguish the two Zhen Kongs, that's fine. However, since you're so useless, what qualifications do you have to humiliate me? Hit me." As he spoke, the two Zhen Kongs raised their wands at the Merit Officer on duty. The Merit Officer on duty clearly didn't expect the two Zhen Kongs to suddenly attack. The wands swept through the sky and instantly shattered the inscription chains. Caught off guard, the wands landed right in front of the merit officer on duty. Damn it! The merit officer on duty was alarmed. He waved his hand and countless pillars of boundless chi surged out like ocean waves in an attempt to block the two wands. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the two wands hit the merit officer on duty. With a loud explosion, the merit officer on duty shattered the merit officer on duty. Even his fingers were dripping with blood. Rebel, rebel. The merit officer on duty shouted, "You guys really don't want to live anymore." As he spoke, the merit officer on duty pointed at the merit officer on duty and said, "Why aren't you guys killing these two Avilders?" "Sir." The merit officer on duty and the merit officer on duty looked at each other and replied, "We were ordered by the immortal emperor to protect the master and disciple of the sutra-seeking extreme bliss. Now that the two Jin Kongs can't distinguish the real from the fake, we can't do anything." Woo! The two Jin Kong's wands once again fell from the sky and attacked the merit officer on duty's forehead. The merit officer on duty was alarmed and hurriedly flew up. As he flew, he shouted, "Quick, quick, send a message to Tai Bai Jinxing. He probably hasn't gone far yet. The immortal emperor's decree is in the hands of the merit officer on duty." The merit officer on duty calmly replied, "We don't have a message from Tai Bai Jinxing. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chidien to vote, recommend, bookmark, and reward. Thank you for all your support." Chapter 4571. Sir. The merit officer on duty did his best to dodge the two magic wands and shouted, "Whoosh!" Before the merit officer on duty could finish his words, the merit officer on duty waved his hand and a golden meteor shot into the sky, disappearing in an instant. Chimpage. Seeing that the message had been sent, the merit cow opened his mouth and several clouds appeared, blocking the magic wand as he shouted, "When Lord Tai Bai Jinxing arrives, see if I won't teach you a lesson." Whoosh! With a clear sound, the clouds were swept away and two Jin Kongs appeared in front of the merit officer on duty. The merit officer on duty was so frightened that he hurriedly retreated. Seeing that the merit officer on duty was retreating, the two Jin Kongs stopped. They lazily put away their magic wands and scratched the fur on their body, coldly saying, "The immortal officials of the immortal palace are only SOSO. No wonder they couldn't send out any capable subordinates. Previously, I didn't understand why Jin Han was so lazy and tried to shirk his responsibility. Now that I look at you all, going too far is as bad as not going far enough. If you all also participated in the sutra-seeking extreme bliss, I would have already beaten your butt." When Jin Han heard this, his face turned ashen. Right now, he didn't want to help Jin Kong find the fake Jin Kong. Instead, he wanted to beat the real Jin Kong to death. "Alright, since Tai Bai Jinxing of the Immortal Palace is here, then I will wait here. Then I'll wait here and see what kind of ability that old man has." The two Jin Kongs were also tired of fighting. They muttered as they stood in the air. However, the two of them revealed an ominous glint in their eyes as they stared at each other, as if they would attack if the other party wasn't careful. At this moment, the fake Jin Kong no longer looked at the thatched cottage. His hesitation had already caused him to throw away his best chance. The arrival of the merit officer of the Four Seasons had completely ruined his plan. Now, he could only act according to the situation. Boom! In just a short moment, a rumbling sound could be heard in the distant sky. The vast energy pillar within several hundred li of the space was like a surging tide. Layers of whirlpools mixed with fragments of inscriptions were thrown into the sky like water splashes. Woo! Amidst the whistling of the wind, a dozen distorted and flat light shadows streaked across the sky and landed in front of everyone in an instant. A wave of majestic aura emanated from these light shadows, causing everyone to feel suffocated. Just as everyone was about to bow and salute, shua! A tricolored rainbow bridge appeared among the dozens of lights and shadows, and shot towards the sky where everyone had come from. Boom boom boom! Hundreds of mighty pillars of energy descended, and the dozens of glowing figures instantly filled up. In an instant, they transformed into several hundred feet tall inspectors. These inspectors were all around the 6th grade of origin energy. Each of them stood there proudly, allowing the clouds around them to flow like water and cover the area within 100 miles. Woo! The three-colored bridge let out a roar and quickly shrank. An old man with white hair and a whisk flew out from the bridge. This old man had a kind face and looked very hale and hearty. However, when the old man landed in front of them, a formless pressure surged through the mighty aura in the sky, causing everyone to feel as if they were looking up to a tall mountain. This official greets Lord Tai-Bai Jinxing. The merit keepers of the 4 seasons did not dare to be negligent. They all bowed and greeted respectfully. Tai-Bai Jinxing's gaze swept across the Tuzhen Kongs, and he already knew what had happened. He waved his whisk and said indifferently, "Wait for me to come over. You must have sent a message for this old man to come over because of these 2 fire apes. Lord is wise." The merit keepers of the 4 seasons said with a flattering smile, "You didn't even wait for this official to speak and you were already able to see the reason. This official truly admires you." Tai-Bai Jinxing did not reply. Instead, he looked thoughtfully at the 2 fire apes, and then raised his head to look in the direction of the Eastern Sea. He said in bewilderment, "This is really strange. This matter of the real and fake Shen Kong doesn't seem to be arranged by the Immortal Palace. Could it be a test from the Leiyin Temple?" Old man Tai-Bai. When the Tuzhen Kongs saw that Tai-Bai Jinxing did not differentiate between the real and fake Shen Kong, and instead suspected that it was a trap from the Leiyin Temple, they could not help but cry out, "What exactly are you?" Before the Tuzhen Kongs could finish speaking, the 2 patrol officers roared, "How dare you!" Then, with a loud boom, 2 bolts of 5 chi righteous lightning struck down at the same time, hitting the Tuzhen Kongs. "Ai-oyo!" The Tuzhen Kongs cried out in pain at the same time, and they rolled in the air in the same manner. Interesting, interesting. When Tai-Bai Jinxing saw the Tuzhen Kongs in the same situation, his eyes lit up. He could not help but stroke his beard and laughed. Just where did the Leiyin Temple get these demons from? They are actually so intelligent. Damn it. The Tuzhen Kongs cried out in pain. Lightning circled around their bodies, and the mighty aura turned into inscription chains that bound their hands and feet. At the same time, they cursed softly, "Why are you torturing this old man for no reason? If you have the ability, hurry up and drag this demon out. Demons are hard to get rid of." Tai-Bai Jinxing coldly looked at the Tuzhen Kongs and said, "Even if this demon brought the Mahayana Buddhist scriptures to the hidden immortal continent, how many Buddhist sects can they ignite?" Previously, this old man was still worried, but after looking at this fire ape, this old man finally understood the immortal emperor's intention. As he spoke, Tai-Bai Jinxing pointed his finger at the Tuzhen Kongs, and the Tuzhen Kongs cried out in pain. Tai-Bai Jinxing narrowed his eyes and looked at the Tuzhen Kongs and said, "Calling yourself this old man in front of this old man, didn't Xuanzang teach you to respect the old and love the young?" After speaking, Tai-Bai Jinxing looked at the dozen patrol officers and ordered, "Wait and see which one is the real Shen Kongs and which one is the fake fire ape." "Yes, my lord." The dozen patrol officers did not dare to be negligent. A few of them used their eye-cleansing technique to look carefully, and a few of them took out their imperial equipment. Those imperial equipment were either mirrors or rings, and all of them emitted a misty green light. Unfortunately, after half a cup of tea's time, the patrol officers looked at each other in dismay. They looked at each other and said in unison, "My lord, please know that we are unable to identify them." "Ah! It can't be." Tai-Bai Jinxing was somewhat bewildered. Moreover, his face was somewhat embarrassed and angry. "You all have the cultivation of Great Grandmaster, but you can't even see through the true form of these 2 demon clans?" "Yes, my lord." The patrol officer at the front was also somewhat ashamed. He replied in a low voice, "With our divine abilities, we can only see 2 fire apes that are exactly the same. We can't see any difference." Tai-Bai Jinxing nodded. "If this is Leiyin Temple's test, how could they let us Confucian cultivators find a flaw so easily? All of you, back off." "Yes, sir." The dozen or so inspectors retreated slightly and sealed off the nearby space. Swoosh. Tai-Bai Jinxing waved his hand and a cold light flew out. It was like a full moon rushing into the sky. When this light appeared, Everyone could see clearly that it was a mirror that was like a full moon. This mirror was different from ordinary mirrors. The surface of this mirror was light gold. However, this light gold color seemed to be slightly cold. Moreover, the surface of the mirror was not flat. It was actually a layer of uneven surface. The light on the surface of the mirror shot out from the uneven surface, bringing with it some black spots. "Quick!" Tai-Bai Jinxing roared. He raised his hand and pointed. The mirror continued to spin in mid-air, and an oval light shadow was born in mid-air. Strange. Zhen Han, who was at the side, could clearly see that Tai-Bai Jinxing's chanting was actually a Daoist mantra. As for the golden light that came from his finger, it was similar to Daoist magic power. Pu. Just as Zhen Han was in shock, Tai-Bai Jinxing slapped the top of his head. A five-colored true energy surged out, turning into the shape of a pear blossom and rushed into the sky. When this cloud appeared, not only did it illuminate the surrounding tens of feet, it also caused thousands of pillars of vast chi to crash down. Woo! The cloud let out a trembling sound. In an instant, it expanded, and the five-colored pear blossom could be seen. It looked very lifelike. Go! Tai-Bai Jinxing opened his mouth and blew. A gust of golden chi fell into the five-colored pear blossom. The cloud rolled and rushed into the light shadow formed by the rolling light shadow. When the cloud fell into the light shadow, it crashed into the mirror. Boom! The sound of thunder suddenly rang out. Strands of lightning appeared on the uneven surface of the mirror. Then, the entire surface of the mirror shone brightly. When the mirror flipped again, a faint golden pillar of light flickered a few times before crashing down. It was precisely the two Zhen Kongs. How is this possible? After the thunderous roar, there was a deathly silence. However, Zhen Han's cry of surprise came at an untimely moment. It's actually two fire apes. Under the pillar of light, the two Zhen Kongs revealed their true demonic appearance. Within the flames that were thousands of feet in size, the two fire apes revealed their ferocious faces. Two sharp fangs protruded from their bloody mouths, and a pair of blood-red eyes were filled with ferocity. After Zhen Han's cry of surprise, she immediately came to her senses and hurriedly said in a low voice, "This junior knows her mistake." Then, she lowered her head with confusion in her heart. After all, no one knew the origin of the Zhen Kongs. Now that two identical fire apes had appeared, how could the mastermind behind this be ordinary? Chimpage. Tai-Bai Jinxing let out a cold snort, and a five-colored light appeared in his eyes. Within the five-colored light, inscriptions that were even smaller than ants appeared. These inscriptions quickly gathered in the five-colored light, forming circles of light. These circles of light rotated like growth rings and slowly fell into Tai-Bai Jinxing's eyes. Crack, crack, crack. The moment the circles of light touched his eyes, they immediately produced thunderbolts. These thunderbolts turned into five-colored lightning and turned into a net. Through this net-like lightning, Tai-Bai Jinxing's gaze landed on the two fire apes' true forms. Ah! When he saw the two Zhen Kongs in front of him clearly, Tai-Bai Jinxing was stunned. Then, as if he didn't dare to believe himself, he blinked his eyes, and the net of thunderbolts in his eyes flashed again. After half a cup of tea's worth of time, Tai-Bai Jinxing closed his eyes and the five-colored halo slowly disappeared. When Tai-Bai Jinxing opened his eyes again, a strange smile appeared on his face. It seemed as if he had a card up his sleeve, but at the same time, it seemed as if he didn't know anything. P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please come to Chidian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 4572. Tai-Bai Jinxing raised his hand and pointed. The pillar of light on the mirror disappeared and slowly returned to his hand. Tai-Bai Jinxing was not in a hurry to put away the mirror. Instead, he played with the mirror in his hand and looked at the two Zhen Kongs whose fire ape true form had completely disappeared. Old man Tai-Bai. At this moment, one of the Zhen Kongs spoke while the other one didn't. However, right after the first Zhen Kong finished speaking, the second Zhen Kong also shouted, "Can you tell who is real and who is fake?" "Of course I can." Tai-Bai Jinxing seemed to have made a decision and replied with a smile. Speak, speak. The two Zhen Kongs shouted together, who is real and who is fake? Both of you are real and fake, Tai Bai Jinxing replied with a double meaning. Bullshit. One Zhen Kong said angrily, since you can tell, why don't you dare to say it? Could it be, this is a scheme set up by your immortal palace? The other Zhen Kong also laughed and said, Old man Tai Bai, if you can't tell, then just admit it. Why are you deliberately mystifying things here? I heard that Immortal Palace's immortal Emperor Go Chen has a clear sky mirror that can search the entire world. Presumably, that thing can tell who is the real Zhen Kong. When His Majesty Immortal Emperor Go Yi makes a move, I can see it clearly. Tai Bai Jinxing said proudly. If that is the case, Lord Tai Bai Jinxing. One Zhen Kong could not help but plead, tell me, who is the real Zhen Kong? If I am the real one, then why didn't I kill that guy? This old man has already said that the two of you are both real and fake. Tai Bai Jinxing sneered, Thunder Sound Temple actually did this in Hidden Immortal Continent. I don't know what their intentions are. If that is the case, then why should I expose them? Let them deal with it themselves. Damn it, damn it. That Zhen Kong shouted, in this world, it is either real or fake. How can there be real and fake? I am the real Zhen Kong. How can he be the real Zhen Kong? Truth and falsehood, falsehood and falsehood, in your mouth, it's actually so profound. The heavens still exist. That's right, that's right. The other Zhen Kong also mocked. Since you know the truth, why don't you say it? It will also let us know who is the true Confucian scripture master. Sun Lei. Tai Bai Jinxing completely ignored the two Zhen Kongs and ordered, take 4 patrol officers with you and protect Chuanzong well. Don't let anything go wrong. This subordinate understands. One of the patrol envoys replied and flew down to the thatched cottage with 4 other patrol envoys. At this moment, one of them, Zhen Kong, was no longer as impatient as before. He looked on coldly without saying a word. Sun Hong. Tai Bai Jinxing ordered, send a message and ask, the Thunder Temple's guardian Heavenly King and Namo Wise Manjushri to come back. Tai Bai Jinxing enunciated the word please very loudly, as if he was angry. Yes. One of the patrol envoys replied and was about to take out a communication object from his waist. At this moment, Tai Bai Jinxing rolled his eyes and said with a smile, Namo Wise Manjushri is a famous bodhisattva of the Thunder Temple. If he doesn't come back after receiving the message, our immortal palace will be guilty of disrespect. Forget it. Sun Hong, go and ask them. I believe they won't be in a hurry to return to the Thunder Temple. Yes, my lord. Sun Hong agreed, and thousands of lights and shadows appeared around her. These lights and shadows twisted and extended toward the East Sea along with the great pillar of Qi. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Seeing Sun Hong fly away, the two Zhen Kongs shouted in irritation and waved their magic wands. I'll beat you to death, you damned imposter. Crackle, crackle. The two Zhen Kongs began to fight again. However, because there were several inspectors in the sky who had sealed the space, the two Zhen Kongs could only fight at an altitude of several thousand feet. They could no longer freely descend. Amitabha. Seeing the 5 patrol envoys descending and protecting the thatched cottage, Chuanzong hurriedly walked out of the thatched cottage and bowed. This poor monk has something important to tell you. Sun Lei didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly descended and returned the greeting. Master, are you hungry? I'll immediately ask the Earth Lord to bring some vegetarian food here. Amitabha, this poor monk is talking about the two Zhen Kongs. Chuanzong pulled Maro Cow and said, this child can tell who is this poor monk's true disciple. Ah! How is that possible? Sun Lei was shocked. These 2 fire apes look exactly the same and their divine abilities are also the same. Even I can't tell them apart. How can this little girl of the mortal realm tell them apart? Amitabha, I'm ashamed to say this. A bitter expression appeared on Chuanzong's face. He said, it's this poor monk's fault. My disciple Zhen Kong accidentally killed Maro Cow's parents in order to subdue demons and devils. Sigh, Amitabha, Amitabha. Sun Lei seemed to have understood and said softly, the power of hatred is too strong. Master, please wait for a moment. After a while, Sun Lei returned and said softly, Lord Taibai Jinxing already knows about this. Master, you don't have to care about this matter. We'll know in a while. Chun Zong was puzzled. However, he knew that he was just a mortal. He put his palms together and said, Amitabha, then I'll have to trouble you, benefactors. Then, Chun Zong brought Maro Cow back to the thatched cottage and waited for the truth to come out. After about an hour, the two Zhenkongs were tired. Just as they were about to stop, a Buddhist light appeared in the distant sky and the sea. Amidst the chanting of sutras, a Buddhist cloud seemed to be moving slowly, but it flew quickly without leaving a trace. It appeared in front of everyone's eyes and immediately appeared in front of them. A mocking look appeared in Taibai Jinxing's eyes as he nodded slightly at the inspectors. As the inspectors nodded, they raised their hands and waved. Hundreds of inscription chains appeared and sealed off the space within a few thousand feet. No one could see what was going on inside. Then, Taibai Jinxing waved the horsetail whisk in his hand and teleported to the front. He raised his hand and saluted, Greetings, Manjushri. We've only parted for a few hours. Now, I have to trouble Manjushri to come back. I'm really sorry. Manjushri smiled and hurriedly returned the salute. Benefactor, you're too polite. We're all waiting for the Sutra of Nirvana to be completed successfully. It's nothing for me to fly back and forth a few times. I just don't know. Benefactor, do you have something important to say? Saying this, Manjushri looked at the sealed space and was puzzled. Behind him, several heavenly guardians of the Buddhist sect also glared at the inspectors and finally fixed their eyes on Sun Hong. Sun Hong shrugged and flew to Taibai Jinxing's side. He only said that Taibai Jinxing had something important to say. He didn't mention anything about the two Zhenkongs. Bodhisattva, you really don't know? Taibai Jinxing smiled again and asked meaningfully. Manjushri shook his head. I really don't know what you have to say. Please say it clearly. Bodhisattva. Taibai Jinxing frowned and said unhappily, the matter has already come to this point. Why are you still hiding it? I've already found something strange. If I say it out, Mahavarokana World Venerable's face will not look good. Benefactor. Manjushri was even more puzzled. He raised his hand and pointed at the sealed space. I really don't understand. Is it the strange thing that Shuzhen said? Indeed. Taibai Jinxing saw Manjushri's reaction and felt a little nervous. After answering, he asked tentatively, Bodhisattva really doesn't know what's inside. I really don't know. Please enlighten me. Manjushri nodded and answered. Okay. Taibai Jinxing smiled faintly and ordered, open the space and invite Manjushri Bodhisattva to take a look. Yes. Everyone nodded and waved their hands. All the inscription chains were withdrawn, revealing the two Zhenkongs in the space. Ah! Manjushri was shocked. Why are there two Zhenkongs? Yes. Taibai Jinxing smiled. There are two Zhenkongs. That's why I don't know which one to choose. I specially invite Manjushri Bodhisattva to guide me. Bodhisattva, Bodhisattva. The two Zhenkongs immediately jumped out of the space and flew to Manjushri Bodhisattva. They bowed and said, Zhenkongs greet Bodhisattva. Unfortunately, after saying one sentence, the two Zhenkongs shouted again, I am the real Zhenkongs. He is the fake Zhenkongs. You are the fake Zhenkongs. I am the real Zhenkongs. The other Zhenkongs shouted with the same voice. Roar. As he spoke, the two Zhenkongs roared and started fighting again. Manjushri Bodhisattva frowned and put his palms together. He asked, Amitabha. Benefactor, which one is the real Zhenkongs? I can't tell. Taibai Jinxing smiled. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked Bodhisattva to return. Benefactor, didn't you find something fishy? Manjushri Bodhisattva said unhappily. Fishy is fishy. The truth is the truth. Taibai Jinxing smiled and said, I can only find something fishy. As for the truth, I'm afraid only the Buddhist faction can find it. Hearing this, Manjushri Bodhisattva understood and said, Amitabha. Benefactor, you are overthinking. There must be some misunderstanding. My lay-in temple has always done things openly. It is impossible for us to do anything behind the scenes. Moreover, Chuanzang just brought his disciple back to the hidden immortal mainland. How could my Lei Yin temple do something so obvious? This fake Shun Kongs must be from the demon race. Although Manjushri Bodhisattva said firmly, Tai Bai Jinxing was still skeptical. He nodded and said, Bodhisattva, I can believe in the world venerable. But these two Shun Kongs. He. Bodhisattva, please use your divine power and we will know. P.S. Fellow Taoists who like this book, please come to Chidian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. Chapter 4573. Amitabha. Manjushri nodded slightly and raised his hand without hesitation. Swoosh. A spot of Buddha's light appeared out of thin air and quickly spread below Manjushri. In the blink of an eye, it covered the space where the two Shun Kongs were fighting. As the Buddha's light fell, countless Sanskrit chants were heard and the sky was covered. The Sanskrit chants were blocked and the Sanskrit chants fell into the ears of the two Shun Kongs. It was so painful that the two Shun Kongs threw away their magic wands and covered their ears with their hands. They rolled in the air in pain. Then, Manjushri raised his foot and stepped on the Buddha's light. In the ripples of the Buddha's light, there were countless phantoms. In the phantoms, there were heavenly dragons, Buddhist kingdoms, and thousands of men and women. The phantoms fell on the two Shun Kongs and an indescribable color appeared. The color faded and disappeared in the Buddha's light. Only two black and white fire apes were left in the space. Amitabha. Manjushri was surprised. He looked at Tai Bai Jinxing and asked curiously, how is that possible? Are they really two fire apes that look exactly the same? Bodhisattva, you've underestimated the power of that monster. Tai Bai Jinxing smiled and said, if the ordinary heavenly feet could see through his true appearance, why did you send me here? These inspectors from the Immortal Palace could kill the fake Shun Kongs. I understand. Manjushri already understood what Tai Bai Jinxing meant. He nodded and used his right hand to pinch flower-pinching finger. He pointed at the light behind his head. 2 drops of golden light flew out from the light. Behind the golden light, there were tens of thousands of strands of faith. Swoosh. The 2 drops of golden light fell slowly. Wherever they passed, the void collapsed. Countless Buddhist kingdoms were hidden in the Buddha's light. However, after the Buddha's light passed by, the Buddhist kingdoms were annihilated. Indescribable waves came out from the annihilation and fell on the 2 black and white fire apes. When the 2 drops of golden light fell, the 2 fire apes emitted Buddha's light again. It was so bright that even Tai Bai Jinxing couldn't see what was going on inside. However, Tai Bai Jinxing heard Manjushri exclaim, How is this possible? Amitabha. Along with Manjushri's scream, there were many strange phenomena in the sky. Flowers fell from the void, and countless chanting sounds came from the void. Rays of Buddha's light condensed into crystal objects as thick as a child's arm and fell into the light behind Manjushri's head. As the Buddha's light and flowers fell, Manjushri's golden body became bigger and bigger, and the light became more and more dazzling. Great wish fulfilled. Tai Bai Jinxing was even more surprised. He didn't understand what a fake Shun Kong had to do with Manjushri Bodhisattva's great wish. However, there was more than surprise in his eyes. At this moment, within the Thunderclap Temple, the 10,000 Buddhas were listening to his lecture. Suddenly, the Mahavirokana Buddha Lord, whose mouth was blooming with Buddhist lotuses, shuddered, and Buddhist lights radiated from his body. Countless heavenly flowers fell from the sky of the Thunderclap Temple and bloomed in front of the Lord. Namo Amitabha. As the Mahavirokana Buddha Lord chanted, he turned to look at the Dipankara archaic Buddha Lord, who had his eyes closed, and transmitted his voice to him, Senior apprentice brother, did you sense it? Amitabha, Lord of the world, I saw it. The Dipankara archaic Buddha Lord opened his eyes and replied with a neutral expression, Ananda has appeared. Sigh, now that he has appeared. The Mahavirokana Buddha Lord sighed and said, it's still too late. Amitabha, it's still too late, and it's still too early. It doesn't matter if it's sooner or later, the Dipankara archaic Buddha Lord said and closed his eyes again. The Mahavairokkana Buddha Lord didn't stop transmitting his voice to the Dipankara archaic Buddha Lord. The Thunderclap Temple was still filled with heavenly flowers, and no one knew what had happened. Only the Mahavairokkana Buddha Lord, who had concealed himself within the void, frowned slightly, as if he was about to wake up from his meditation. Looking at the shore of the East Sea, the Manjushri Bodhisattva's scream faded away, and the Buddhist lights disappeared. The phenomenon of great wish fulfilled also disappeared instantly. The Manjushri Bodhisattva retracted his foot from the air. With a puzzled expression, his gaze landed on Zhenkong. How is it? Seeing that the Manjushri Bodhisattva's surprise didn't seem to be fake, Tai-Bai Jinxing smiled and asked, "Isn't this a little strange? This mystery. Should the Thunderclap Temple be the one to uncover it?" Amitabha. The Manjushri Bodhisattva chanted and said, "Benefactor, it's a long story. However, I can swear on the name of Buddha that I don't know about this, and the Thunderclap Temple doesn't know about this either." Then, Bodhisattva, what should we do? Tai-Bai Jinxing pushed the decision to the Manjushri Bodhisattva. However, the Manjushri Bodhisattva didn't hesitate at all and said, "I can't make the decision. I still have to return to the Thunderclap Temple and kowtow to the Mahavairokkana Buddha Lord." "No way." Tai-Bai Jinxing was surprised. "It's that serious. It's that serious." The Manjushri Bodhisattva affirmed. "Bodhisattva." Before Tai-Bai Jinxing could say anything, Zhenkong shouted, "With your abilities, you should know who's real and who's fake, right?" This. The Manjushri Bodhisattva was a little troubled. After a while, he replied, "Amitabha, real is fake is real. When real is fake, the fake is real. Although I can see through it, I can't see through it. What can I do? Bullshit." This Zhenkong scolded, "One is an important minister of the Immortal Palace, the other is a bodhisattva of the Buddhist sect. Both of them can see who's real and who's fake. However, neither of them dares to admit it. One of them says real is fake is real. The other says real is fake is real. Then you tell me who's real and who's fake." "That's right." Tai-Bai Jinxing nodded and said, "Real is fake is real." The Manjushri Bodhisattva also shook his head and said, "You are wrong. Real is fake is real." Heavens! At this moment, Zhenkong still didn't dare to call him master. He could only throw himself into the air and cried with tears streaming down his face, "In this world, what kind of justice is there? Even the immortal and Buddhist sects don't dare to say the truth. I really don't know. In this world, how can there be such a clear distinction between black and white?" Seeing Zhenkong, the Manjushri Bodhisattva felt much better. He chanted and said, "Amitabha, Zhenkong, there is no need for you to say any more. When we reach the Lei Yin Temple, the truth will naturally be revealed." "That's right, you fake. Why are you crying here? When we reach the Lei Yin Temple, in front of my Buddha, everything will be revealed." The other Zhenkong stood in the air and sneered. "You fake." Zhenkong was furious. He waved his magic wand and pounced towards the other Zhenkong. The other Zhenkong also said angrily, "You are the fake." With that, the two Zhenkongs started fighting again. "Amitabha." The Manjushri Bodhisattva chanted and waved his kasaya, capturing the two Zhenkongs in the air. He turned his head and said to Tai-Bai Jinxing, "I will have to trouble Benefactor to stay here. I will be back soon. Take care, take care." Tai-Bai Jinxing knew the importance of this matter. He cupped his hands and said, "With this old man here to protect Chuanzang, nothing will happen." Just as he said that, woo-woo, a gust of evil wind blew. In the East Sea, a huge pig demon flew out from the sea and flew towards them. This pig demon was naturally Zhenjie. He scanned with his essence will and immediately realized that something was wrong. He blocked the Manjushri Bodhisattva and the other heavenly guardians. He shouted, "Eh? Isn't this Manjushri Bodhisattva? Why do you have the time to come here from the Lei Yin Temple? Could it be that you saw that we have been working hard in the sutra-seeking state of bliss and wanted to invite us to have a vegetarian meal?" Amitabha. Facing Zhenjie, who was stronger than him, the Manjushri Bodhisattva stopped. He clasped his hands together and said, "The sutra-seeking state of bliss is in trouble. I am here to subdue this demon. This demon is of great importance. I cannot make the decision. I can only bring them back to the Lei-Yin temple and ask Mahavairokkana of the world to personally issue a Buddhist decree. Damn it. Hearing that the sutra-seeking state of bliss was in trouble, Zhenjie immediately jumped up and said, "Who did this? 3 monster kings just came. I fought them off with great difficulty. I chased them for several days to find out their background, but they still ran away. I didn't expect that they would create a diversion. Oh, by the way, Bodhisattva, how is my master? Chuanzang is fine." Manjushri Bodhisattva didn't dare to say more as he was afraid that Zhenjie would cause trouble. He said hurriedly, "He is now under the protection of Taibai Jinxing, the inspector and the 4 seasons meritorious ministers of the Immortal Palace. He is very safe. I won't talk more with you. Go and protect Chuanzang now." "Yes, Bodhisattva." Seeing that the Manjushri Bodhisattva was anxious, Zhenjie didn't dare to say more. He bowed and watched the Manjushri Bodhisattva leave. However, after flying for a few miles, Zhenjie suddenly shouted, "Bodhisattva, tell Mahavairokkana of the world not to cause any trouble. Fighting and killing every day. You don't look like a monk at all." Manjushri Bodhisattva's body swayed in the air. He said a few words to the Guardian King and then turned into Buddha's light and left. When the Manjushri Bodhisattva couldn't see him anymore, Zhenjie stuck out his tongue and shouted, "Oh my! What happened? Even the Manjushri Bodhisattva came. I have to go and take a look. I don't want my master to know that I sneaked out to sleep." When Zhenjie came back, the inspector and the 4 seasons meritorious ministers were relieved and didn't dare to stop him. After Zhenjie greeted Taibai Jinxing, they put him into the thatched cottage. Seeing that Zhen Han and the dragon horse Zhenfeng were outside the thatched cottage and that Cao Cao and Chuanzang were inside the cottage, Zhenjie was immediately angry and shouted, "Master, where did that damn fire ape go? I was just chasing after the 3 demon kings. How dare he neglect his duty and cause master to suffer such a great fright?" P.S. Fellow cultivators who like this book, please come to Chidian to vote, recommend, collect, and reward. Thank you for all your support. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.